lightning strike, I think we're going to try to start on time. So I'd like to call the meeting, the BCC special meeting to order. It's 1 minute after 2 o'clock. Madam Clerk, could I have a roll call?
Chair Hamilton,
Present.
Commissioner Hanson,
Present.
Commissioner Moreno,
Present.
Commissioner Roybal,
Commissioner Roybal, have you called in? Commissioner Roybal is calling in, so
Commissioner Garcia.
Here.
You have a quorum, thank you.
thank you very much. So regarding the agenda, Manager Miller, are there any changes or anything? Or can we?
Madam Chair, no, the agenda is as posted, unless there's something that moves around during the meeting, but I don't anticipate needing to move anything.
Fabulous, thank you. So what's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, I move to approve.
Second.
Thanks. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. So that we have the agenda approved. So next we're going to the capital planning review process. First, we're going to start with an overview of the current process. Paul? Welcome, thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, good afternoon. Paul Olofsson with the Planning Division. So I'm going to have a PowerPoint presentation that is coming up right now. And in your packets, you also have a white paper. This PowerPoint reviews and outlines the content of the white paper. So I'll be going through the PowerPoint, and we'll also be talking about proposed new processes for capital planning, and then asking a little bit for direction from the board to proceed with some initiatives. So, starting off with the capital planning policy. I think this is it. No. Yeah, can I get next slide, Matt? Okay. So, the capital, just overall, capital improvement plans can be short range, 5 years, or even longer, up to 20 years. And these are tools that help ensure jurisdictions to have capacity and finances to provide infrastructure, public facilities, and general services. And having a good, solid plan ensures that your investments are well placed, well planned, and coordinated, and are effective in delivering service and facilities to the public. The goal, then, of this presentation is to propose an updated capital, next slide please, Matt. Propose an updated capital planning process that will guide efficient, transparent, systematic, evidence-based, adaptive, and realistic capital planning.
Paul, can you
budgeting.
actually speak into the microphone? I have
Yeah,
some
okay.
people not understanding.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So next slide, Matt. Just an overview of what we currently do in Santa Fe County. We have a 5-year capital planning process, and this is internal within the county, and staff are able to enter up to 5 years in the future capital needs. This can include items for new facilities, replacement of existing capital assets, and improvements to existing or new. And this is managed annually as part of our current capital planning budget process. We also have the ICIP, which is the annual plan we turn into the state, and it's called the Infrastructure Capital Improvement Plan. That's a requirement to turn into the legislature annually to allow for legislators to consider funding capital projects per entity, and that's open to all municipalities throughout the county. This slide here now depicts our current process. Yeah, stay on that one, please. So we have input from the community, we have county priorities, and those are inserted into the ICIP, which we submit to the state. There's also ICIP requests are included in our internal 5-year capital planning window when we do our annual budgeting process. And through that annual budgeting process, we can consider GRT bonds, other revenues, state grants, federal grants, and development fees to help fund those 5-year window of projects. So, cool. And an analysis of our current process is the CIP and ICIP are really short-term. ICIP includes an outlook of 5 years, but it serves as an annual plan. And our 5-year plan, again, is a short window of time. It's usually quite reactive to current needs, but it's not proactive in planning out long range, both as far as what the county needs, what's coming to the county, and what we can actually accomplish. And oftentimes, the requests and the budgets are based on the department requests and don't holistically evaluate what are the county-wide needs.
Welcome to CenturyLink conferencing. Please enter your passcode followed by the pound or hash key, and I'll connect you.
Oh, should I wait?
That might be Henry.
Matt, do we need to wait?
While I confirm your passcode.
Okay, let's just keep
For
going.
joining Global
Okay,
Meet,
I'll keep going.
when you hear the tone,
So also, we don't really have a very good system of evaluating projects and requests for projects. And often we are unprepared to implement projects, and particularly when new projects are put into the mix that we hadn't planned for. Next slide. So what we're proposing is to consider some different ways of looking at our capital planning processes here in the county. First of all, we've conducted an infrastructure build-out analysis, and this establishes general infrastructure needs to plan for projected growth, and this is based on both economic projections as well as population projections. And we are also looking at the growth patterns, particularly in SDA 1, which is our primary service area, and which our county code, the Sustainable Land Development Code, is designed to help direct development to. And the concept there is that you plan and direct development to areas where there's existing infrastructure or easily expandable infrastructure. And that includes roadways, water, wastewater, emergency services, parks, open space, and trails. And this IBA will also be incorporated with the upcoming water and wastewater master plan that Utilities is conducting. The next slide just depicts, here's one of the maps that came out of the IBA. And this, again, shows future roads and potential needs for roads, and focused in this example in the community college district area. Another new capital planning tool is the 20-year CIP. And this would expand upon our current 5-year web-based planning process. And it looks to systematically identify and prioritize projects, and is accompanied by a spreadsheet tool that we showed you at the last budget study session to changing growth and financial scenarios. So that tool helps us evaluate projects based on not only the priorities of the development needs, but also based on our countywide goals and the budgeting process. In the near term, it lists high priority projects for years 1 through 5. Medium term projects would be years 6 to 10, and then long term projects years 11 to 20. Another new capital planning tool is the impact fee study and budget analysis. And this is also what we presented at the last BCC, or the budget study, capital study session. And it provided a summary of existing revenues, analysis of impact fees adopted in other counties and municipalities, and potential revenues from impact fees in Santa Fe County. So, next, we have some proposed capital planning policies that we would like to outline for the board to consider for using as we move forward in our capital planning. One is we need to adapt planning tools engage in long-range planning, proactively address future needs, and formalize means of identifying, prioritizing, and programming capital projects. Also, we would like to revise capital planning framework, consolidate capital planning and budgeting into one integrated system, and also improve the project planning process. And this would create a regular schedule for review and scoping of projects, and make sure the projects are valid and doable, and also consider staff capacity before bringing them into a budget process and actually funding them. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we have the spreadsheet tool that helps evaluate, prioritize, and schedule projects based on available funds, needs, immediate county needs, and strategic planning goals. Where do we want to go and where do we want to put things? And the new tools should be integrated into our existing web-based capital planning platform, and that can be done and would allow for then not only the 5-year window, but up to a 20-year window on our future capital needs.
Paul, do we already have this spreadsheet? We're already using it?
Madam Chair, no, we have developed it in a kind of a beta test environment, and we did present it at the last capital meeting, so we have it in hand.
That's
We
what
haven't
we're referring
implemented it and started using it.
Just check. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay, so also we want to talk about revising our capital planning framework. And this should lead for more long-range and proactive planning on our capital needs, ensure that needs and priorities are implemented on time and efficiently. Look at capital needs and requests included in the overarching 20-year window, and also address basic service needs and high-priority projects, particularly in the first 5-year window. And as we go to a 20-year window, we know that when you're looking out 15 years or even 6 years, you know, that's a little bit farther, and it needs to be refined and tuned as it goes along. But in the first 1 to 3 years or 1 to 5 years, we can have a pretty good idea of where we are, what resources we have, what our needs are, and then how we can address that in a timely and efficient fashion. And of course, this also feeds into the 5-year process and the ICIP process. If we can have a clarified and really clear understanding of what our basic needs are and what our planned goals and priorities are, we can then better address our ICIP requests, tailor that to what we really want and need, and also look ahead that we know there's a bond cycle every 4 years. How can we plan that and get things in the pipeline?
Hang on a sec.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to state for the record that Commissioner Roybal is on the phone.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Welcome, Commissioner Roybal.
Thank you.
Okay, good. And are you able to hear everything?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Thanks. I assume, Paul, I assume we're going to talk about this last piece again, or a bit more.
Yes, yes.
Great.
So that will be, I think, the discussion policy, but we can have questions now if you have direct questions. I think as the rest of the presentation goes on, it may answer some more questions.
Yeah, let's let the presentation go on and get information, but clearly that's an important point
Yes.
that we need to deal with, so.
Okay, so now moving on, this is slide 14. This is just a diagram that helps kind of depict what I'm talking about in a more visual, graphic sense. So on the right-hand side, you have the bigger circle with 2 smaller circles in it. That's the 5-year CIP and the 20-year CIP. Both of those are, you know, tools to help us plan and look forward as we're moving out in time. Also, there's an arrow from the 5-year CIP to the ICIP, and that was what I was talking about, trying to tailor our ICIP request and that whole process to more clearly match county priorities and needs, and then have that available for review and funding at the state level. But we also, if you look to the arrow that's pointing directly to the left and the square box, the 5 and the 20-year also looks at our other revenue sources that we have available, the GRT bonds, other revenues, state grants, federal grants, and development fees. And what else am I missing? So then the two arrows above show that how do we feed the 5-year and the 20-year. So we feed it through our capital maintenance and fixed asset needs that we identify internally at the county, and also that we have the community requests, growth-driven needs, and for infrastructure across the county. So we're looking at multiple inputs and multiple areas of need, putting it into the planning process to then hopefully generate more refined and strategic plans for how to implement and fund our capital needs. So the next slide talks about improving our project planning process. And as I stated before, we are aiming to be more realistic and systematic. So we have a clear and replicable process for evaluating projects and putting them into a funding system, and then also a clear and systematic process of identifying how much we can get done and when we can get it done. And that, again, it talks to projects being scoped, ranked, scheduled, and actually ready to implement. So as part of this improved project planning process that we're proposing, we would have project proposals from staff, constituents, commissioners, or others using a project request form. And it would include description, justification, and rough cost estimate. Non-county organizations, nonprofits, or others could also submit an application, and the request forms and applications serve as a preliminary scope, just a very basic scope of what a project might be. Then that proposal would be reviewed through our capital planning office, that's our office planning, and we'd work with public works staff who are responsible for implementing the projects to help review that request and say, is it doable? Is it practicable, and what's it really going to take to get it done? And also, we would be able to then maybe refine the scope, because someone might want a road from A to B, but they didn't consider there's a need for a bridge or drainage or other issues or right-of-way. So working together as a team with different users as well as the people who are responsible for either implementing or maintaining those projects will give us a much better idea of what the project really entails and can we do it, and for how much. So then the capital planner reviews the proposals, works with staff, and then we compile the list of proposed projects. And next, and again, like I was just talking about, we do a better scoping with using committee of staff to, our plan is we'd meet twice a year, look at the need, any relevant data that would help inform the need or the demand for such a facility, look at cost, capacity internally with us for either implementing it or maintaining it, and also, again, the fiscal impact of the proposed projects. The scoping committee would be including, or should include, a capital planner, projects division staff, facilities maintenance and operations staff, the user office or division as appropriate, and the IT department if that's applicable. Next step in the planning process would be to determine need. And we could have this capital planning committee we're proposing would meet twice a year to update the CIP based on the scoped projects and the already evaluated need. Determine if the proposal is a basic service, it's something we need to keep the lights on and keep the county functioning every day, and also evaluate and rate projects using the prioritization tool. And this committee should include, again, the capital planner, the county manager's office, projects division, finance, public works, and fire if applicable, as many of our vertical construction projects are fire related. Also, during this evaluation process, we would look at capacity and bandwidth. This is how can we get the project in the pipeline and get it done? Do we have the staff? Do we have the resources to make this happen? Not only money, but people and time. So through this evaluation process, the Capital Planning Committee will evaluate the capacity to implement the projects, look at the complexity and staff involved in the project completion, estimate the project's duration and time needed for staff to fully execute the project from design to closeout, and then also compare alongside available hours. So if the project's going to take one person a year and a half, do we have that person, and do they have enough room on their plate to add another project to? Another part of this planning process is to look at the projects we have. And this is just a very simple graphic talking about how this could possibly fit in. So if you look at a 5-year window, and this is 2020 through 2024, and these are proposed projects that are in the pipeline or could be in the pipeline, and then we propose a new project or 3 new projects, and we say, okay, we just, as we did at the last, or as you all did at the last BCC meeting, we had several state-funded projects that came through as grants that we adopted, and so now, and those projects have a window usually of 2 or 4 years, depending on the funding source, to get implemented. So we have to look at that window and determine where do these projects fit into the bandwidth of the county to get them executed. And if we insert them into the process, you notice one project then moves to the right, meaning it moves out in time. And these are just hypothetical examples, but in its real world reality that we have so much time, we have so many people to do this, and if we add more in, something's got to move to make space for that project to be completed at that time, or other mechanisms we could apply to get the projects done.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
clearly, a bunch of us, both commissioners and senior staff, recognize this generically. Like, it's a bandwidth problem. If you're doing a series of projects and you add, 3 more projects to be done, unless you're really underworked, something has to give. But specifically for planning, do we actually? Is that something that we would have to add? Just like, even though these are just these graphics are just examples, it is a very similar. It's more generic, but it's very similar to what people use to plan. So do we actually plan? Do we have an idea of what our capacity is, and we can estimate it currently and get an idea of how much we're pushing off projects when we accept others? I mean, my experience is that our senior staff plan really well, so it's not that I think they're not doing it. I guess I'm just looking for, is this something we can realistically, include in the planning process, in our
Madam-
revised planning process, a better, happier planning process?
Madam Chair, yes, that's what we're proposing, to get it. I think you're exactly right. Staff does an outstanding job of trying to execute what they can when they're given it, but there is a true bandwidth capacity issue that we can only, it's just like anyone. You have 24 hours in a day and 365 days, so you plan it out. And I think the county has traditionally done very good at making things fit and trying to get them done, but that it serves largely as a reactive process, and what we're trying to aim for here is a more proactive process, so that things come in, a project comes in, it's already well understood. It has a start and an end, or a proposed start and end, and a clear understanding what is entailed in that, and that we're not kind of just starting with an idea and then playing it out. So that one of the main points of this proposed process is to help us plan better and get more proactive.
Absolutely. I just, somehow, when you actually see the names of the projects that aren't going to be done for started for 2 more years when we thought they were, people go, wait a second, that's a project I recognize as being really important, and it affects so to have that information during the planning process is impactful. Manager Miller?
Madam Chair, part of your question was, do we do it now? We do not. Currently, we do not say, here's how many man-hours we have, and here's how much, so therefore, here's our bandwidth, and then you've budgeted so many projects, it's double our bandwidth, or it's triple our bandwidth. And it happened as a result of kind of for years, we didn't have much in the way of capital funding, or a lot of it was tied up in just BDD. So 50% of our capital outlay gross receipts tax went to BDD. That wasn't even our project. Yes, we had people who did it, but we weren't the project manager.
Lesser bandwidth for the amount of money.
Yeah, and so, and now we have an enormous amount of projects between the AMIT project, all the stuff that we've done with bonds, and we took the capital outlay GRT and shifted a lot of that back to county-only projects, not regional projects that were managed by other people. And what we've never really done is assess, okay, here we have all this, now we have additional money, plus we increased our bonding capacity. We used to do maybe 20 million, and that's crept up to 35 million. So we've added $15 million there. We've added another GRT for doing facilities, which funded these two administration buildings primarily, but also a lot of maintenance projects. So we've added a lot of funding and never really assessed internally how much staff are needed to meet that level of appropriation, and are they managing projects as efficiently as they could? So part of this process is trying to determine what is our current bandwidth, what should it be, is it, are we doing things efficiently, and then are we short staff and capacity for the kind of funding we get? And then when you have a good legislative session and the state has a lot of money, what does that do? And that's that picture, we're trying to visualize it for you, but it's not based on actually, did we go in and say, okay, this project will take this many hours because it's this level of complexity, it's this dollar amount, and it's starting where we don't even own the land, and we have to find the land, and we have to, what's the scope of the project? How many man hours will it take, and how long will it take? And therefore, what does it do when we get something added through an appropriation? What does it do to our actual schedule? That's what the process, what we're trying to do. And we're trying to quantify that with current staff. So what do we have? What happens when we lose an FTE and it takes us 3 or 4 months to find somebody to fill that job? What does that do? I mean, we piled on a lot of things without really changing our structure and understanding our actual capacity.
I think that's a good summary. And while all the things you said are probably intuitively obvious to most of the people in this room, when you actually have to make decisions on them, and there are multiple of them, having at least some aspects of it sort of written down so you see this a little more specifically what it does, which projects and how long, and that. Like I said, I think that this would be a good change because it would be very impactful to the decision process.
Right, and we just, Madam Chair and Commissioners, those are hypothetical, but it's real.
Yeah,
In other words, we just picked those 3 that we just got appropriations for, and then we picked 3 that we currently have on our plate to do, and said, well, if this were the hours it takes, look what it does. And we're driven by time limitations on
That's a good
grants. Whether it's a state or a federal grant, they have time limitations and so what ends up happening is we put off those projects that you funded for through GO bond or GRT because they're not, the money's not time limited. Bond money you do want to get spent, but it doesn't actually expire. You just have other issues with not spending bond money, but it doesn't expire and go away. And so that's part of the challenge here is to say, well, when we accept a grant, are we truly informed of what that does to projects already on our plate?
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Paul.
Madam
Oh,
Chair.
Commissioner Garcia.
Since we're actually going to ask questions during the presentation, I understand, I get it. How do we build a baseball team? How do we determine that the guy should be, or woman, should be playing shortstop or should be playing first base? So we're at that point right now as into how do we create a baseball team with the talent we have and with the bandwidth we have? How do we determine bandwidth of an employee?
Well, Madam Chair, Commissioner, I don't know that I have an answer of how we determine bandwidth to an employee, but I think we look at what can reasonably be accomplished and the complexity of a project. So, and as you know very well, that you can have something that sounds like a very basic, simple project, but it still takes hundreds of hours to accomplish it. And you can have a very complex project. It's going to take other hundreds of hours. And a complex project might take 2 or 3 or 4 people to work on it together to really accomplish it, whereas a single or a more simple project might take 1 or 2 people. So I don't know that I have a direct answer to your question, but we can look at what we can reasonably expect based on previous experience with our staff and with our projects and say, this seemingly simple project still took 18 months. So if we're going to plan for accomplishing it, we should look at approximately 18 months. Or we look at another means to do it more efficiently or more effectively.
So, Madam Chair, what's the time frame to determine the bandwidth for the existing projects we have? Or are we going to do it as we go along? Or are we going to do it, is there a plan to figure out project A is going to take so long? And whenever in your presentation here you have, 120 days, 2 years, 3 years for a certain project, is that just for construction, or does that include the grant, as Manager Miller says? Does it
You mean like
include
the
the
plan?
procurement? Does it include going out to bid? Does it include all this, or is that just construction?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, yes, and we would plan it. As we move forward, we would implement this, and that's what we're kind of asking for direction on today. Should we move forward with this type of process? And then we would have to determine how do we determine that bandwidth. And it should include everything you've described. It has to come from the procurement of a design, and then the actual accomplishment of the design, procurement of construction, actual accomplishment of construction through to closeout. It should also look at an impact on existing staff. Is if we build this facility, will it require more maintenance work, money or people? Will it require custodial work, et cetera? So we're really looking at a holistic impact of a proposal versus can we build Project X? And certainly we can build Project X, but what are all the ramifications coming off of that?
So, Madam Chair, so back to the baseball team. So, back in projects days, we just need to figure out we have a lot of talent on the ship, and so we got to figure out everybody has their expertise in different areas. There was a gentleman that used to work for projects. He used to love to write RFPs, scope of works, Scott. But sometimes I felt that we had him in a different department, but if he's excellent and great at writing scope of works, then we just got to create a baseball team. However we do it, we just got to move forward in that direction.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, that's exactly what we're proposing is how can we do this better and more effectively and more realistically so that you all have, as policymakers, have a clear picture of what it's going to take to do something, not only the dollars, but the time and the effort and the resources, the human resources, as well as other impacts to the county.
Manager
Just a
Miller?
little challenging to me because I've
And to that point, it's not simple. I'm not proposing that it's going to be a little simple color chart like this and it all flow like magic. This is a new process, and what we want to do is start moving forward down this path and really get our hands around it. It will not be perfect. It will not fix every single issue or problem, but it will get us in a direction where we're working collaboratively across departments, across disciplines, and we're working towards a realistic and doable plan.
Madam Chair, just remember, this is a planning document, right? It's like not a moving target, but it has, for example, page 18. So page 18 basically talks about the capital planning committee should include it says include a capital planner, county manager's office.
Yeah, okay, I'll get it.
That's not in any particular order, right? That's just,
Madam Chair, Commissioner, no. And this is, again, this is a concept that we want to then bring forward and have you really blessed. So we're asking today for direction to continue moving down this path, and then as we develop more solid tools, we'll bring that to you as well.
okay, thank you.
Okay, Manager Miller.
Madam Chair, so I wanted to somewhat address what Commissioner Garcia was talking about a little bit. One of the things we don't do at all right now is we don't look at staff capacity when we have a project as an idea or gets thrown on the ICIP, or when we fund it.
Right.
We look at how much do we think it'll cost to do it. But we never say, well, how many man hours will it take to do this project? And when can we fit that into the schedule? So immediately what's happened over the course of the last few years, as soon as we budgeted something, everybody expected that that project would start. Or as soon as the board approved it actually started around 2011, 2012, they said, oh, we've got all this money and we want to do all these projects. And it was assumed, I think, from many of the board members, well, that means you'll start them all right away. Well, that was never possible. We had money in the bank and we had bond money, and all that came in, and lots of projects were approved, because when we do the bonds, we have to know what we're selling the bonds for. But the minute the voters pass that doesn't mean that's when we'll start the project.
Right.
It likely means we'll start the project in 2 to 4 years. But that's not the anticipation or expectation from the public or from the board based on the way we present it. It's like, do you want to fund these projects? And we don't present, and here's where they'll really come on to onto the board to start being really worked on as a project and not just an idea, because of staff capacity.
Right.
Unless you want to add a whole bunch of project managers, spend all that money down, and then let a bunch of project managers go. And part of that issue is that people don't really like term positions, but project money is one-time money, and you never know when it's going to come in. So we've tried to balance having a staffing level of recurring and permanent funded positions for projects, as well as some term positions. But it's tough. I can give you an example. We run out of money on certain types of projects because the bond money gets spent like that, and then we've got a person, it's like, what do we do with them? I can't have them work on something else because they're funded with money specific to specific types of jobs or projects. And so what we've never done in this process is, okay, if this is going to be funded with this kind of money, and this is when the money's going to come in, and this is the person, the staff capacity for that type of project, and they're already busy, it's not going to happen. We're not going to start on that project for 3 or 4 years. So that's one thing, and it's because we haven't been able to quantify that and show it to you.
Right.
And part of this process, what we're asking to do is say, if you, and I think Paul's dead on, this isn't going to be easy, because it is hard to say, it's hard to scope a project, not just money and like what's the general scope, but how many staff hours is that going to take, and who? And, we run into projects that, let's take Mount Chow. Who'd think we'd still be working on it how many years later? 15? And stuff well beyond our control to try to get that to be a real project. So, but chewing up hours nonetheless of project managers, because they're doing another thing and another thing and another thing to try to move that forward. And so if we were to have said to you in the beginning, yeah, acquiring this land and doing some cleanup, that'll take, I don't know, 1,000 man hours, we'd have been dead wrong, because we've easily used 1,000 man hours and we still don't even own the property. And it hasn't really even come to fruition as a project. That said, though, it could be adjusted
Right.
by giving you reports that say, yeah, well, this one, we way underestimated the amount of man hours it'll take, and this one, we overestimated, so we gained a little time here. But we don't have a system to do that yet, but we want to have that system and have that system incorporated in the planning process and the appropriating process.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
just on that note, I totally understand Manager Miller, and I'm glad that we're actually going in that direction, as in, we got to figure out this complexity of our projects department, or how we're figuring out, because some of the things we need to figure out with this team again. How do we create this team? Because, some of the things you might want to throw in here is the complexity of a project. How complex is it? Is it very highly complex? Is it not? Is it a sidewalk? And determining what type, because you can ask 10 different project managers how to run a project, and they'll give you 10 different answers. And so if somehow we can actually get to, maybe we've got to start with the complexity of a project, high, medium, low, and figure out what type of individual is experienced in that type of a project. And then we got to start figuring out who that team is, what that team, how it works. And for lack of better terms, you have A squad golfers, B squad golfers, C squad golfers, and they're all good golfers, right? Because everybody's trying to, so I understand where you're saying and where we're going.
I think this is like very true, but a little down in the weeds, because I think some of this is what we will be discussing when we're trying to talk about the details of what we're getting an overview of now. So maybe it would be good to get the rest of the overview, because, it is, much as I hate the expression, the devil's in the details, means we do have to talk about those levels of, how you set things up to actually implement them effectively, but.
Yeah,
Maybe we
Madam
can
Chair,
go
that's a
on.
great segue into the next, there's only a couple more slides, and to your point, Commissioner Garcia, yes, absolutely, the low, medium, high, and that's outlined in the white paper as well, that is definitely part of it, as well as people, as well as funding. So the next slide just kind of talks about the overview of this overview. So what we're talking about is doing a new capital planning process, and it would, have a group of individuals across the county, across disciplines, who are working together, looking at compiling a 5-year project list, CIP, and the budget. How are we going to pay for it? Is it grant? Is it GRT? Is it bond, et cetera? And then looking at the funding and what the prioritization is and the staff capacity. So that's exactly what you guys, or what we've just been discussing. And then trying to tailor, then this is really important, I think, to your point, the ICIP request, annual request, to be a little more focused and a little more strategically pointed to projects and priorities that we really want to or need to implement here at the county. And then having the board have the ability to annually review and adopt not only budget, but also the prioritized project list. And then keeping projects that didn't make that annual round of funding, or biannual if we change that, but the project is still valid and real if it's a need, but it may have to get pushed out a farther year because of whatever the prioritizations are at the time. The next slide then outlines how that process would potentially be. And this is based again on our fiscal year budgeting. So we'd start in July, and we'd start working with this review committee. And in early August, we could define GOB projects if that was a GOB year. By end of August, we'd have a CIP update and ICIP. That would be what we submit to the state. And then September, October, we would schedule an evaluation and do the scheduling of projects and evaluating them. And in mid-November, we would have the cutoff for non-county projects coming in. That's something that we're going to talk about later on in the agenda. We'd review and finalize scope for proposed projects. Look at a potential for evaluating the ICIP if needed based on non-county requests that had come in since or after the initial ICIP process. And then in January, February, as part of our initial part of the budgeting process, our annual county budget, we can do the update to the CIP saying, here's our next 5-year, here's our next 10-year, here's our next 20-year. And then we continue to evaluate through the budget process, and that then We continue scheduling and evaluating projects, bringing that back to you, so there's a twice annual kind of review and window to look at where we're at and what we're doing. So this is an iterative and flexible process, so that you're continually looking at what is coming in, what's going out, and do we need to adjust? Are we making it, are we not, or are we going faster than we thought we could? So
So
that's
just for
kind of
clarity, this is a timeline, this is what you're proposing, and it would link to all the things that the improvements we're going to talk about and hopefully adopt, and then potentially refine this or adopt it as it is if this looks good, but you're talking about adopting something that we will then try to stick to and make work.
Yes, Madam Chair. And again, this is the first swing in it. We might have to change it. It might,
Yeah,
we will
that's-
refine it and work through it. But the point that we're aiming for is that we have a transparent and clear process for everyone, for the public, for staff, for the board, to know where we are at and how are we doing this. And the first couple swings might be a little slower or a little rougher than we would like, but I think after we implement it and it becomes the norm, it becomes the process, then people have that sense of reliability. And it's really important, too, to emphasize this is kind of a change of our, it's a community change within the county. We need to really look at doing this process in a different manner and in a better manner that includes all the different users, all the different expertises that go into this process. And so if we put in the good effort on the front end, hopefully we have a much better process and product at the out end. And that's not only a plan, that's actually implementing projects and getting things in the dirt. So, and that segues then lastly into, I guess, the ask. And on the agenda, I know we have discussion, but, and then these are the ask points that we'll ask for direction from the board to continue on. So first of all, we want to work on the integrated capital planning tool and integrate that into the county's existing web-based platform. And this would require some outside contractor support, but working with our IT department to ensure that the planning tool that helps us do the evaluation process is included and integrated in a user-friendly, so that staff and anyone can get into it, use it, and understand the output of it. And so that's one of the asks we're asking for. Next is to refine and adopt this planning kind of framework I'm talking about for capital planning by a resolution, and that's something we would bring back to you at a future meeting. But the question or the request today is, should we continue down this path? And then later on, we'll be talking about a policy for non-county entities requesting capital support or asking the county to be their fiscal agent. And that will outline another item on the agenda. I think it's item 4. And then finally, we're asking for direction from the board based on our presentation at the last capital budget study session regarding impact fees. The next step to really look at impact fees, and this is governed by the state statutes, is to develop an impact fee study. And that would then help us look at what are the range of rates that we would want, that we could consider, the board could consider, and then how or if the board would like to move forward with that. But that's a kind of statutory requirement to make the potential of impact fees come to reality.
And this is impact fees, like traditional impact fees. We're not talking about for like handling outside projects or something, just impact fees.
Correct.
Cool, thank you. Okay,
So, and that would also, we would contract with some consultants to help us develop that and that process moving forward.
excellent. So at this point, yeah, Commissioner Hanson.
Question?
Well, yeah, we can entertain some short questions. I think there would be a real benefit in getting through this whole preliminary review as a basis for having further discussion. But yes, by all means, go with the, if.
Thank you, Paul, and your staff for putting this together. I think it's really important for us to start thinking about all of the elements that go into a capital project. I just wanted to bring up that, on a number of pages, we're talking about roads and wastewater, And this board and the board before has brought forward resolutions, lead by example. Climate change is incredible consideration, especially from our constituents. And so I feel like what needs to be in this is that it needs to say solar or climate change, or because those are things that we're going to have to determine what that calculation is in the beginning, not at the end. Not at the end when one of the commissioners say, well, how come we didn't put solar on this building? That's considered in the beginning. You know, and so I don't see that anywhere. I see roads, I see a list of, you know, water and wastewater, but I think that climate change and solar impact, solar on a building need to be included up front in the beginning. And so I don't see that anywhere in here. So that concerns me because we have a number of resolutions that this commission has passed, the Paris Accord meeting certain standards. The state has passed to be carbon neutral by 2040. And so I don't see that in this capital planning. And so I would like to see that in here somehow so that when we're looking at the triage center, when we're looking at the Turquoise Trail Community Center, how much solar do we need to make it 100%? You know,
Can we keep the questions kind of short? Because I really, we're a third of the way through the meeting, and so.
Okay, but, you know, I felt like since that was, since some of the main issues that were brought up were basic roads, sewers, I think that solar needs to be one of those basic things.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, it absolutely is. And in our background planning that we're working with the different departments, we've already identified the need at the beginning of a scoping of a project to include sustainable elements and discussion and working with our sustainability group in the planning and scoping of those projects. So it was my slip to not mention that in this presentation, but it has already occurred, or we are working on that
It needs to be in the
as this rolls out. So, yeah, exactly. So it starts when you're scoping a project. That is one of the elements that we would evaluate, along with bandwidth, along with other doability.
How
Okay,
much
so-
bandwidth- yes.
I think Commissioner Moreno had a question. Is it short? Or, because we'll have lots of time for discussion afterwards if we get through these, you know,
I'm
presentations.
sorry, I misunderstood. I thought that after this presentation, we were doing questions. So,
No, it was an important point, but, you know, we can make the point quickly enough and then move on, because we have two other introductory presentations. Commissioner Moreno.
Thank you. Manager Miller, the sense I'm having is that we're working with a set of people. Does that mean that that we're not going to grow the workforce anymore if a need arises, if we need more project managers, solar installers, or whatever? Is that on the table?
Madam Chair,
More people?
Commissioner Moreno, I think that's one of the things we do need to assess. We need to assess the existing staff and capacity, and like I said, are they doing things as efficiently as they could be? Are the right people doing the right jobs? So in other words, if we looked at our projects and said, and really did understand the complexity and the number of man hours, and we assign them to somebody, you know, where is that going to fit in their workload? What's their capability to take that additional project on? When would they be, how much time could they dedicate to it? And then also when we get large sums of money all at once, is that something that the board wants to consider, and that's hiring some term positions? So for instance, if we do get like $10 million additional from the state in a bunch of projects that we weren't anticipating, do we want to also look at saying to the state, hey, how about some money for a term position to get these projects done, so that we're not taking them off of projects that we have? And I even talked to some legislators about that, about whether they would support something like that, and had some positive reaction to that. I said, because it's hard for us when you hand us 10 projects that weren't on our list, you've put us in kind of a bind. So I think it is one of the things we have to be able to assess. At what point do we say, you know, there's enough here in additional project funding from grants to support an additional term position for 2 years? And for us to be able to quantify that and ask you for that during a budget process to say, hey, we need, if we want to stay on schedule with what we have, we should probably try to fund a term position for 2 years to take care of all of these new projects, just for example. But right now, we don't really have an ability to assess that very well, and to tell you that we could bring someone in, hire them, train them, get them able to do our process and handle these 10 projects and know that they would get done in a 2-year time frame. I can't say that we have that capacity to do that right now. And so that's what we want to develop, is a process for evaluating that and a system for training project managers that is relatively quick and efficient, as opposed to everybody, as Commissioner Garcia said, you probably asked 10 different project managers and they'd say, oh, I would do it this way in 10 different ways. We shouldn't be doing that. We should have a manual that says this is the way we handle projects, and project manager ones handle the least complex, and we have this many, and there's this many new ones coming online. Do I need another project manager one for a 2-year time frame or not? And I will say this too, it's very hard to find project managers. We advertise and advertise and advertise, and have a difficult time getting ones on board. And sometimes when we found good ones, no sooner do we get them to somebody like Los Alamos say, hey, we'll pay you more, and they're gone in 3 months. Turnover is always a problem, and particularly right now where unemployment is pretty low, finding good people that actually have project management skills is another challenge.
One more item. In my fantasy world, the legislature would work with us when they are considering projects that they want to do. And it's kind of irritating when we have to follow the rules. The state of New Mexico says that. But when it comes to the legislature, it's Katie, you know, all the horses get off the campus. I'm mangling my words here, but they should work with us and not just give us stuff that we can't use.
Madam Chair.
That's my rant.
Commissioner Moreno, I like your fantasy world, because I would agree it would be nice if they appropriated for the projects that we want and that we have the staffing to do. I think developing a process and educating them on our process and getting some, making sure they understand that we do want to try to accommodate projects that you want to fund, but we need you to work with us and get those in the door so we can assess just what that does to our man hours, our capacity, and how we could do it. And I think having a data-driven capital planning process might help us do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So, Paul, this should move us along to 2B, which is discussion of the Santa Fe County capital planning policy.
Madam Chair, just.
Sorry, I'm not on
Just
this.
really quick, I'll be really quick.
Well,
I'll end
can
this.
we,
Just really quick on this. So just, Paul, if you
If-
can actually keep in mind on page 7 is infrastructure build-out based on the SDL, the growth areas. If we can also just please keep in mind, not just the SLDC where growth is planned to go, but other communities that don't have water, that don't have proper infrastructure, so we can put that in the larger picture.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, absolutely. That's part of the evaluation process. And that goes to what Manager Miller was just saying. If we have a transparent and structured process, it helps people know when they can get in, how to get in, and how long it might take to move forward.
and if you notice, that is in the presentation on the timeline. It is there to have community-delivered projects and stuff, so all of those things are included. So this is the overview of the whole process. So with
Madam Chair,
everybody's,
I did just want to ask for
Yes.
the last slide here, asking for direction. Is there any,
I thought you were finished that one. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, so on that slide, page 7, it says include roadways, waterways, systems, sustainable solar elements, emergency service parks, open space. I mean, that would be the right place to add that word, because I feel like that needs to be up at the top.
got it?
Okay, thank you. So what's your last piece on the slide?
Just that I think one of our goals of this presentation was to get a sense of the board on these next steps, or last steps. Is that a direction the board feels we should continue moving down? And
Get direction on these,
taking these steps, continuing with integrating the capital planning tool into the county's existing web-based
so
platform.
you want that direction now as opposed to after all the,
Well, I don't want to vote or anything, but is there any, heartburn, or is there problems with moving this forward?
okay, great. So Commissioners, Commissioner Hanson?
So one thing on here that I didn't see also present is the community input. Like, how are we gonna, like we have the Edgewood Wildlife Center on our CIP that, that came from some constituent down in Edgewood. Like, how are we gonna deal with these? That's the one thing I haven't quite seen. Maybe I missed it on here.
On slide 24, the second to last arrow on the right is community requests. And
Is what?
That is community requests. Here, I can back up to that.
And so how will we,
That would be the similar process to what we're doing. That's actually up on your agenda later on today, too. We're going to
okay.
present on that under item 5
So
for
does-
this year, what we're doing.
So
Yeah.
Madam Chair, a quick answer to that, Commissioner, is actually whenever you have a constituent that wants.
I think Commissioner Hanson still has the,
No, I was
Yeah,
going to
so
help her out.
I just want to make sure that, we're going to start this ICIP input next week at, beginning on June 10th and going through the month of June. And I just want to make sure that we have a process for how we're going to filter those community requests, because that is really what we're talking about. Like, do we have the capacity to buy a zoo in Edgewood or a wildlife center? Maybe we don't have the capacity to do that, and we have to figure that we have to take that off of the CIP, because that's not something we have the capacity for.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, that's exactly what this system I'm outlining would help us do, to identify challenges such as that.
Yeah, and
Okay, so-
I think
Madam
that's a
Chair?
good plan, and I want you to continue to go forward, because I think we really do need to refine how we're going to work on capital outlay and capital.
excellent. Commissioner Garcia? Okay, Commissioner Moreno, do you have input on the next steps? I would certainly add that I think these specifics are important components. We definitely need the policy, we need the web-based platform. I think it's good that you identified places where we need support for doing some of the development. We definitely need a policy for all the outside projects that are suggested for us, so. So is that good, Paul? Are you ready to move, are we ready to move to 2B?
Or not to be.
That is the question.
Yes.
That's what, okay, so who's up to talk about the planning policy? Three minutes?
Madam Chair, this is actually item 3. It's development fee, impact fees, and utility expansion charges. And so,
Oh, so you did all subsections
yeah,
under 2.
so
My
we just
apologies.
covered 2C.
We're on to 3.
Direction to continue forward. So the next one I'm going to do with John Dupuy. I'll kick it off, and just to remind you that at our last capital study session, we did review the potential impact fees. And so one of our planning processes or planning discussions has been that utilities is working right now to develop a water and wastewater master plan. And within that process, they have also looked at not only impact fees, but also utility expansion charges. So impact fees are held or developed under one part of state statutes, and utility expansion charges are under another. So an impact fee is for, they can be defined for specific activities like roads, parks, wastewater, sewer, and John is going to help us understand and has a presentation to outline what's the difference between an impact fee that is more the standard way to help pay for future growth or future infrastructure needs based on growth, and John has a different description of what utility expansion charges are. So I'd like to turn it over to him to help elucidate that.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to expand on an impact fee report that was previously presented to you by the county's planning division. It included a summary of options for the impact fees as Paul has described, and it did not include the implementation of any of those fees. So in addition to the difference between UECs and impact fees, this will also include a presentation and report which is required for the implementation process. So through the Utilities Master Plan project, a consultant, HDR, was selected to provide services which included implementation of the development fees for the utility. We identified that New Mexico law allows for municipalities or counties to assess either UECs or impact fees for water and sewer. The process for UECs is less burdensome. It requires fewer hearings and does not require a review by an advisory committee. So it's a less arduous process for implementation
And what?
than implementing impact fees.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, do you have handout, or are we,
We have a presentation that will follow mine where HDR presents all the report and findings and
But do we have something to
options.
follow now? A presentation to, okay,
No, ma'am.
okay, thank you.
So additionally, the city of Santa Fe also implements UECs. It's rather standard. I haven't found a community that implements impact fees for water and sewer in New Mexico. And my conclusion is that it is very plain to see that UECs are the preferred method to implement development fees for water and sewer.
Madam Chair, sorry, I'm a little lost. Or UACs again, really quick?
They're predominantly the
What
same
does it
thing.
stand for?
They have the same
Utility
criteria.
extension charges, and there's a white paper he did that's in our board docs, but we don't have the presentation. Yeah.
So whenever we come, Madam Chair, so whenever we talk about development, I guess, are you talking about somebody building a house, somebody putting a modular home? Are you talking about a 700-lot subdivision? What is development?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, development is predominantly initiated by subdivision of land. So for whatever purpose, the impact that that will have on the water or sewer facilities is accommodated for.
So, Madam Chair, so you're talking about development in your eyes is a platted subdivision,
Correct.
brand new? Okay, thank you.
So HDR has developed a presentation to explain the county's existing fees. We have some that are similar to a UEC or impact fee, but we don't call them that. But we would like, or propose to, of a few options, potentially replace those with a UEC, which has a study to substantiate the fee. And after HDR's presentation, we will be requesting direction on implementation of your option based on their report. So I stand for any questions you have before we begin the presentation by HDR.
I think we can go, oh,
I'm sorry, tell
Commissioner
me the
Brook.
acronyms again. What are they?
Utility expansion charges?
Utility,
UEC.
okay.
Yeah.
And then?
Impact fees are the other. So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, the authority for impact fees is New Mexico Statutes, Chapter 5-8-1. And the authority for UECs is New Mexico Statute, Chapter 3-26-2 for sewer and 3-27-4 for water.
Manager Miller, did you have something to add? Please.
Madam Chair, and maybe I can just help clarify this a little. So when we went forward with the growth management plan, the sustainable growth management plan, it was always directed by the commission to staff that we analyze doing impact fees for development. And so planning has been given that direction to look at what it would take to do impact fees. And part of that requirement to even get to a place of doing impact fees is having a 20-year capital improvement plan. So why we're bringing these two together is, one, we want you to adopt or give us direction to go forward with doing this 20-year capital improvement plan and the tools to build that. And that data is what helps inform what our impact fees could be, if you so choose to do impact fees. But at the same time, John and utilities have been doing their utilities master plan and looking at where the growth for water utilities and where the growth for sewer is going to be and where we would be expanding our system. And as part of that, also looking at how do we pay for that? So an alternative to impact fees are these utility expansion charges. So we felt like, and from the consultant's perspective as well as utilities, they've said maybe rather than doing impact fees for water and wastewater, we do utility expansion charges because they act similar to impact fees. And then for other things, we look at impact fees for the roads and the other services. So while this is a little complicated, the reason we had to kind of bring it up is because it really makes a difference of if we go do an impact fee study, the development fee study, do we want to include water and wastewater because you'd rather do impact fees, or do we exclude them and we move forward with UECs for water and wastewater? So, which is probably the more simple process. But we wanted to make sure you had the information of what the consultants have found and what they're recommending relative to UECs.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks. So John, how about if we roll along then?
So Gabriel Alvarado with HDR will be presenting on the study that they performed, and it will be with a slide presentation.
Okay. Could you introduce?
Madam Chair, the slide show is in your packet, and it's presented by Judy Dean and Gabriel Alvarado, and that is on the first page of the slide presentation. It's your attachment, and they're from HDR.
This one,
Ca-
It's not coming up on my,
3B.
It's listed as a PDF.
so you have,
oh, it's up higher.
you have 3, and then there's a little attachment there, a little paper.
Okay,
Then you click on this.
okay, I know, I got that, but we've been jumping around, so I was not getting that. Okay.
Well, welcome, Gabriel.
Yes,
Thank you for coming.
thank you for having me, Madam Commissioner, members of the commission. So I'm Gabriel Alvarado with HDR Engineering. Also got Judy Dean here with me from our office out of Bellevue, Washington. She did the majority of this work related to the UECs, the utility expansion charges. I'm HDR's project manager for the overall water and wastewater utility master plan project. And in conjunction with that, we performed the rate study. And then another step beyond that was looking into these utility expansion charges. So we've got a short presentation for you here today. Again, thank you for having us. So, as I mentioned, HDR reviewed the county's current approach to how you handle these development fees or connection fees, and we looked at it for both water and wastewater. We also did our own calculations to look at what fees the county could potentially be charging or could consider charging in the future. So in this presentation, we're going to review the definition and purpose of why we're establishing these utility expansion charges, a quick overview of the general methodology of how these charges are determined and established, and then give you a quick summary of what we've come up with in terms of the charges for you guys potentially moving forward in the future. And I'll let you guys know, feel free to interrupt us at any time during the presentation if you have any questions.
That doesn't
But I know
seem
you
to
want
be
to
the
get through
problem.
these, so I just wanted to add that before I move ahead here. So utility expansion charges, a brief definition here. They're known as many things depending on the utility you're dealing with, as we just kind of experienced here, a little bit of confusion on the difference between the terms. But they're basically a one-time charge that's assessed, and it's a charge required for all new customers that are desiring service. So as Commissioner Garcia asked, a new development coming in and asking for service, it's a charge assessed against those new customers, and it could be charges to existing customers that are looking for an increased level of service. So maybe they want to expand facilities or take more water, generate more wastewater, et cetera. Those customers could be assessed these fees as well.
Just really quick, it's for new customers, it's considered a new subdivision. So if we have an existing water
It could
line,
be a new subdivision, or it could be there's an empty lot in an existing subdivision and somebody's going to build on that empty lot. That could be considered a new customer as well.
Madam Chair, also couldn't somebody who has just land and does a lot split and puts 2 homes or whatever, it would be then too, anytime they connect.
So if
Right.
somebody could have an existing
Any new,
1-inch meter and they want to have you put a new 5-inch meter next to the 1-inch meter, that's another case where this would apply.
so just going fast forward through your, Madam Chair, so just going fast forward through your presentation, I saw you had depending on the size of the line, whether it's 3/8, 3/4, 6-inch, whatever else, that determines the price.
Correct, and we'll get into that in the next few slides here. So last thing on the definition, the charges are determined based on the value of the existing utility infrastructure, plus maybe whatever future infrastructure is needed and how that infrastructure is needed to serve those customers. So the purpose of the charges, typically these are used to provide equity between existing customers and new connections to the system. The existing customers have already paid for the service that they're being provided. But whenever you build a system, you're building it with extra capacity for future customers to make connections to that system in the future. So the existing people have already paid for what they're getting. The fees are then also there to help you recoup some of that cost for building that system to allow for those other customers to connect in the future. So it's just equity against the two customers. So John mentioned this a little bit in his introduction. So all of this is based on state law. So there's state law allowing utilities to assess these charges against your customers. There's a formula for how these charges are determined, and we'll get a little bit into that more in the next couple of slides. But at the bottom here, as I mentioned in the definition, it's based on looking at the value of the facilities that the utility has. So in the formula, you take the value divided by the capacity of those facilities. That gives you a dollar amount per gallon for each component of the system. That's then multiplied by the amount of usage in the system, so you can determine on a per customer basis what the fee needs to be imposed. And that's how you come up with what the utility expansion charge is per customer. And then, as I mentioned earlier, then you look at size. This is based on, so this is your base fee. Then that gets multiplied looking at capacity, which is typically done on a meter size basis. So this would be your base fee based on the smallest meter, and then the fee is increased for your larger meter sizes. And you'll see more of this on the next slides as we continue here.
Can we go through a few slides and then, like, write your question down and we'll ask them at the end? Because we're losing continuity.
So I'll do this next one, so then I'll turn it over. So this is just going to be a quick overview of what the county is currently doing in terms of these fees. So when we went through the rate study process and looked at the rates that the county's charging, so on the water utility side, you're currently imposing, you guys are calling it a water connection fee. And this table has a summary of what that water connection fee is. So for a 5/8 inch meter, anybody connecting to the system or getting a new 5/8 inch meter, they're going to pay a fee of $2,750. If it was a 10-inch meter, on the other hand, they're going to pay a fee of $129,000. So that's where the ratio is applied to increase the fees based on the increased request for capacity. So these fees were originally determined in 2011. They haven't been updated since then. In July 2018, Ordinance 2018-4, we updated the rates, and these fees are currently included in the county's current rate schedule, but there were no changes made to the connection fees when the rates were updated. Another important point here to note, and maybe if necessary, John can provide some more information on this. The county's not using a 3/4 inch meter for the most part anymore, so that fee probably, your current fees, everything is really based on that 3/4 inch meter size. So you can see 3/4 inch, 1 inch, 1.5, they're all based on the same fee. But moving forward, that 3/4 inch meter fee isn't going to apply because the county's not installing many 3/4 inch meters anymore. It's just because of, is there a good reason? The capacity of a 5/8 inch, moving from a 5/8 to a 1 inch, a 3/4 inch doesn't really provide any additional capacity. So if you're going to do a meter, you may as well do a 1 inch if you're going to do a 3/4 inch. So that's really the reason why you're getting away from the 3/4 inch meters. So now I'll turn it over to Judy, and she'll do a little bit of explanation on, those were your existing fees. Judy will talk about what we came up with for future potential fees.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to discuss this. It happens to be my passion. I do a lot of these studies across the United States, so it's always interesting. Everyone is different and unique. I wanted to go back to this one slide that Gabe was showing. The reason I have the red highlights is because you can see that the current county meter ratio, that second column, the 3/8, 1 inch, and 1 1/2 are all being charged the same amount, and the 2 and the 3 inch are being charged the same amount. And when we get to another slide, you'll see that gallons per minute ratio difference in them. So I just wanted to follow through that. So I am going to give you an overview, and I'm going to get a little detailed here because it'll make going through sewer a little bit quicker. So actually, this always seems to be kind of a complicated subject matter for people, but it's basically a simple formula. You're taking your total cost of infrastructure and dividing it by the total capacity that you can provide to your customers. And for example, you might have a $25 million investment in plant and be able to serve 25,000 customers. Simple math, you've got $1,000 per customer investment. But when you designed and built the system, you only have 20,000 existing customers. You still have 5,000 more customers coming on in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So what this process is doing is trying to bring your system to a current value for when they hook up to the system, because they need to pay back the ratepayers for the amounts that they've been providing for them all along, because they weren't here at the beginning. As I mentioned, each one takes a special process, but there's also documentation that goes with this. We use the Santa Fe County Infrastructure Build-Out Analysis, the county infrastructure inventory of your systems by component, county debt service schedules, county CIP plans, and also there are some industry
Madam
terms.
Chair, who's making the noise out there? Can you guys
Madam
please stop?
Chair,
Thank you.
that's our contractor. Of course, they had to do it today for this building. They're doing boring.
Okay.
I just
thank
told
you.
Tony that it's
that doesn't
pretty
work.
loud in here.
So I wanted to kind of preface that there are documents that back up these calculations, along with some industry standards. You might hear us talk about AWWA, which is American Water Works Standards, and they have standards for gallons per minute for different size meters. And also, in order to escalate the fees to current day dollars, we use ENR, which is the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index. So these are all reliable sources. But there's basically 4 steps to the process. The first is we look at your system planning criteria, and we use the county's build-out analysis, which showed 360 gallons of peak day per 1 ERU. The next step was to look at your asset data, and we didn't have the asset data in the detail that we wanted, because we wanted to look at each component by capacity, because that is how you do the calculation, and how you implement the fee is based on capacity. So what we did is for storage and transmission and booster stations, we looked at a cost per gallon. We knew what your capacity was for each of those items for the county, and used engineering cost per gallon, current engineering cost per gallon, to come up with what a replacement cost would be. The production and treatment is a little bit different here, because the production capacity is a lot larger than the treatment capacity, but basically your level of service is potable water for the most part, so you would use the treatment capacity for that. And we use the actual 124 million that is current as the cost for production and treatment, because part of calculating the fee is to make sure to reduce it for any outstanding debt service. When a customer pays a connection fee, they become a ratepayer, and in those rates, or through property taxes, they will be paying for some of the infrastructure or replacements of items. So you want to make sure that you're not including anything in the fee that they're eventually going to be paying as a ratepayer. So I needed to match up apples to apples, and that's why the production and treatment is at the current value, because our outstanding debt credit is at the current outstanding value, so that it would equate to replacement
And
cost.
just for clarity, that is the capital cost of production and treatment, not annualized operations costs.
Correct, correct. So you add up the existing replacement cost, and then there was one future CIP item, which was a redundancy item that was considered growth-related, and you subtract out your outstanding debt service, and you come up with the maximum allowable fee. So I would repeat that, maximum allowed that you can charge. You can, as a policy, charge something less than that. You just can't go over that, that fee. So on the next slide is what we came up with as options. At first, I want to talk about the second column over, which is a safe operating capacity gallons per minute. And you can see under the 3-inch, it shows 300 gallons per minute, which is about a 6-meter ratio, or 6 times the amount of a 1-inch. In other words, 1 inch is 50 gallons per meter times 6 equals the 300 gallons per meter. And what it's telling you there is a 3-inch meter potentially could be equal to 6 single-family equivalent units. And that's why we were recommending that the safe operating capacities be kept for each one of those levels of size on meter sizes. As far as the overall ratios, the counties, I think 10-inch, we're showing 46, and I think the county was at 43. So it was pretty in line, other than the fact of just making sure that each graduated size of meter pays the amount. So we're looking at we came up with 3 options. The very far right column is that option 3, calculated maximum. That was that maximum level at replacement cost. And we know that's a little bit high, partly because of your production costs and treatment costs being at a level, the production being a little bit higher, and then dividing by the lower treatment capacity amount. The option 1 is your current fee, just taking that and implementing that AWW meter ratio. So for example, the 2-inch current fee is $6,835, and under this option, it would be $10,832. The option 2, which is the current fee, and we've escalated by that ENR number, that Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index, from 2011 to 2018 to come up with an ENR, or a current value of the 1-inch is 4,105. And again, that also includes the AWW ratio. So that option 2 is kind of bringing it up to scale, which a lot of utilities do, is they implement these fees and then just ENR them every year, look up to 5 years, unless there's like a major change in any of the capital improvement plans or any of their planning documents. But it's a way for them to keep their value of their existing system at current values. So those are the 3 options that we came up with water, is the 1, 2, and 3.
So how did you get maximum allowable, option 3?
That was back when we were talking about, we went and took the replacement cost for your pump stations and transmission booster pumps. We took the capacity times the average engineering cost per gallon, and then we took the production and treatment current values less the outstanding debt to come up with the maximum amount. So we kind of feel that's a little high. That's not replacement cost, and that's usually kind of the maximum level you'd be able to do it. A lot of times you can also do it at original cost, but we didn't have that available to us at that detail. So on the next chart, we show a comparison, just to kind of see how you line up. The first one is your current fee of $27.50, option 1, keeping that but implementing the AWW ratios. Option 2 of taking your current fee of at 2011 and bringing it up to $2018. And then option 3 of implementing a maximum allowable fee. You can see that option 2 is pretty much in line with the other green bars of your neighboring cities and counties or utilities. Just keeping in mind that you can see on the footnotes, it looked like Santa Fe didn't update their fee in 2014, and Espanola in 2016 and ABC Wu in 2007. So it looks like they're probably going to need some updates as well. So, but the option 2 kind of is in line with your, and that's part of the policy thing, is the maximum sets you what you could possibly charge, but as a policy you can charge less, and a lot of times you look to your criteria of your community, what is happening in the other utilities. So that's water. Let's see, on slide 12 is sewer. Like I said, this is probably a little bit faster. Same process. We look at their system planning criteria. We look
So
at
before we move on, do any commissioners have questions about the water part? Commissioner Garcia?
So really quick, I see how you, Madam Chair, I see how you actually came out with a calculation based on the improvement of the utility system. Does that surcharge actually include maintenance for the future years of that? Like the commissioner said, it doesn't include staff, but does it include did we get into depth to look at how long the line is going to last, how long the pump stations are going to last, any of that?
Not necessarily, but with the UEC fee, you can use the money towards repair and replacement items, whereas some of, like the impact fee is really restricted to growth. So UEC allows you to use the money towards debt or towards maintenance replacement of items. So it's a little bit more, it's not as restrictive.
And then also this might be for John. If you have a 6-inch meter, you said you could roughly feed 4 to 6 dwelling units out of that meter. So is our policy, if you have 4 to 6 dwelling units down in a piece of property, can we actually utilize that 1 meter to feed all 4 or 5 of those homes? Or are we requiring an individual meter for each one of those homes? Or if you don't
Madam
know,
Chair,
then you can-
Commissioner
you can get that.
Garcia, most likely it would require a single meter for each home.
Okay. And then also, in regards to page 10, so right here, you actually calculated the neighboring communities, cities. Are they actually following the UEC, which every year they go up so much, or are they actually just?
I know Santa Fe is using the UEC terminology, and I think ABC Wu might be impacted. The other 2 are UEC, for the most part, the UEC.
So whenever they pass a policy or a resolution and or an ordinance, they're actually going to increase it so much per year.
If somebody's answering, can you come up to the mic, please?
Yeah, I don't think they're increasing the fees. As we noted in the footnotes, that's the date that they were adopted. So we didn't calculate those fees. We just took whatever they have in their current ordinances. We'd have to go back and research their ordinances to see if there is a cost escalation factor in there. So yeah, I don't know if they are or not.
And then also one last.
I guess the only one that's noted on there that is City of Rio Rancho. They are increasing their fees, and it's noted in the footnotes on the slide there.
And then one last question, Madam Chair, is regarding this actually includes the Buckman diversion plant, right?
Yes.
So just one of the hard things that challenged me to that is majority of the customers from BDD are within the city limits. And so whenever that little pipeline or the pipeline goes out to the county residents, they're actually paying the cost for this entire system. And when 80% or more are actually city customers. So that's just some of the challenges
Right. But on this specifically, we only took the county portion of infrastructure and only the county portion of customers
So, Madam
and
Chair,
future customers.
did you take into account the Buckman diversion pumps, filtering systems, all of that?
Only the portion that would have been allocated to the county.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it's only county cost, county capacity, county existing future customers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But to go back to one of your comments, a lot of times we've seen within a resolution or ordinance that they include setting the fee for year 2018 and then also providing the next 3 years adjustments within the fee, or providing a paragraph that says it to ENR annually on January 1st, because it eliminates having to keep going back.
Commissioner Hanson?
So this fee would also impact like our larger water users?
Only depending on, it's not based on usage, it's based on capacity. It depends on the size of meter that you've installed.
The size of the meter, and what about the size of the pipe?
Yes, because it's taking your total infrastructure, which is designed based on design capacity, not usage, and implementing it to the customer based on the capacity that they've chosen, meter size that they've chosen for capacity. So because you can have a 3-inch meter and the person may be using it more like a 2-inch, but the fact is they have a 3-inch, so you have to provide that peak day demand for that 3-inch meter. That's part of the charge.
Thank you.
If I could add it, I mean, it would apply to any user. So the user's going to determine what size of meter they need when they connect to the system. So any new user that connects, their fee is going to be based on what size of connection they ask for.
But for
It would
clarity,
apply to any user.
this is connection to the county utility,
Correct.
not mutual domestics and
And
private
then
wells.
and then after this fee, then they still have to pay their normal usage through rates. So this is just the initial fee to connect to the system. After that point, they pay their normal usage fee like any other customer connected to the system.
So this is not going to apply to existing users. This is only applying to new users.
Yeah, it would only apply to an existing user if they had a 2-inch meter and came in and wanted to have a 3-inch meter. They would need to pay that 2-inch, 3-inch difference. And I know it's a little confusing, but think of it as rates pretty much pay for operation and maintenance type items, and these fees pay for infrastructure that you've had to put in to provide the service.
This one quick, might be too detailed, or if, I don't know if you thought about this or you've thought about this in other communities. If you had an individual family that actually just installed a $20,000 water system, a well.
A what?
A new well on their property. And we're trying to save the aquifer in that particular area, and the county water line goes through the road all of a sudden. Is there any way that these people can get compensated some way, somehow, from not utilizing the aquifer anymore, but yet utilizing the community system?
Well, they would have to connect to the community system at some point, so they would pay for a connection charge, but are you saying they should get a credit for having a well?
Have you ever seen that done anywhere?
Yeah, but that's usually separate from this. That's usually, like a line extension or an agreement, latecomer agreement type of situation individually. It's kind of unusual for that situation.
Because just kind of the challenges that we have here in New Mexico, northern Mexico, is whenever nobody wants to connect to the water system until their well goes down. So those are some of the things that.
Yeah.
Well, there are requirements for connection in the SLDC if you're in certain areas. So that is partially addressed, but I recognize there are other situations, but there are people who don't even have the option of connecting because they're too far out, spatially disparate from the
Right.
county utility.
We have to remember that there's other parts of the county out there that are not just in the SDLC. There's other communities that aren't in this growth area that have existing water lines that
Clearly
possibly may or
remember
may
that.
not want to connect. So
And I think part of it comes to that's more of an individual, commissioner policy on those particular situations. Is when you're looking at a UAC, we are looking at a system-wide system. We're not geographically looking at individual systems. So that's how the fee is based and implemented.
Yeah, let's move on to wastewater.
ready for sewer. Okay, so sewer is is the same methodology, same type of terminology. We have documents that specific to the county that we use. It's a 4-step process. We look at the system planning criteria, and within the infrastructure build-out analysis, it showed the 288 gallons peak day demand for sewer. The asset data, again, was not in the detail that we wanted. So we looked at the replacement cost of the existing infrastructure, and we looked at component by component, capacity by component. And the existing estimated replacement cost was $17.3 million. Along with that, we looked at the future piece, and within the future, it had earmarked for replacement of the treatment plant at some point. So we did not include that in this calculation, since we've already brought the plant up to replacement value, because that would be double counting. And at this time, the sewer does not have any outstanding debt service. So adding the existing replacement cost value, we came up with the maximum allowable utility expansion fee. And on page 13, it shows 3 of the options. Again, we're currently, the sewer fee is a flat $180. Option 1 would be looking at the City of Santa Fe's current fee brought up to $2018. Their fee was in 2014. And option 2 would be looking at the surrounding neighboring utilities. And then option 3 is the maximum allow, and you can see it's up to $10,000, which shows that it's pretty accurate equates to what's looking out on the CIP as far as replacement value. And on slide 14 is kind of a summary of this comparison. See the option 1, the 960, is based on the Santa Fe, and it looked like, remembering back, that the City of Santa Fe updated their water in 2011 and just updated their sewer fee in 2014, but it was just an escalation. It wasn't a full UEC calculation. And then option 2 would be the 2,000, which is kind of the maximum amount that's around in your neighboring utilities. And I think the important thing looking at the sewer is that there is the potential for the sewer treatment plant coming on board, that's going to eventually need to be replaced. And at this point, the county is only collecting $180 as a flat fee. So, this is probably the time to start thinking about getting ready to start to accumulate some funds to be able to make that capital improvement plan. So I kind of went quick through sewer. Is there any questions on sewer? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Gabe to summarize.
Thank you.
So just to summarize, as we went through our analysis, the UECs were determined to establish a reasonable relationship between the value of your utilities, the level of service they're providing, and the fees that are imposed based on those values. They reflect the value of the county's current infrastructure and some capital improvements, as we mentioned, or a limited amount of capital improvements. The fees that you elect or decide to impose, they can't exceed the calculated value. So as Judy mentioned, we came up with what that maximum allowable is. It can't go above that. You can do anything below that, but nothing above that. And we would recommend that these fees be updated periodically based on an industry standard index. Judy mentioned the ENR CCI. There's also the CPI, Consumer Products Index, I guess, or Price Index. So that's another index that could be used to, over time, gradually increase those fees to keep up with current costs. So our recommendations in terms of fees that you should consider adopting would be both option 1 and option 2 for both water and sewer. So option 1, take your current fees, escalate them using that ENR index to bring them from the previous level up to current $2018, $2019, and then also get the fees aligned with the AWWA meter ratios so that they're set at more of an industry standard. For sewer option 2, we would recommend trying to maintain the level near your neighboring utilities. Your current fee seems to be too low, so try to get it more in line with what's going on in other utilities around here. So both options, they update the fees, they get them in line with industry standards, and they kind of keep you competitive with your neighboring agencies. So next steps here, we would be looking for recommendations from the council and whether or not you want to proceed with scheduling hearings to consider adopting the new fees. And we're open for any other questions that haven't been answered at this point.
Manager Miller?
Madam Chair, so why I wanted to make sure this presentation got done is this, they basically had this information from doing their contracted work with utilities on the master plan. We've had UECs in place, but as I said, we haven't really updated them. And then we're also looking at impact fees. Now, I realize impact fees for water, wastewater, or any impact fee you have is for future growth and based upon future growth. So an impact fee study would give you something different here. This is based on cost of what we have already spent, estimated cost of what that like replacement costs today. And then that gives you your maximum allowable cost. But if you notice, recommendation isn't to go to the maximum allowable cost. It's really more of a competitive, palatable cost. And that's likely to be the same way with impact fees. You're going to come back with something that's a maximum allowable amount for an impact fee, but politically, probably not where you would set the rate anyway. So what we're trying to do today is look at whether you want us to continue forward, and I think it's staff recommendations to stay with UECs on water and wastewater, but whether to continue forward with that and bring back an ordinance change with some proposed increases to UECs, or whether you would like us to do an impact fee study and include water and wastewater in that impact fee study, or do the impact fee study exclusive of water and wastewater because we would look at UECs.
Well, I think I was definitively on board with going with UECs after John Dupuis' intro. I think it's really clear they act the same, they're a bit more flexible, and otherwise they're calculated and they achieve in a very similar manner and achieve a similar purpose. So we can go to the other commissioners, but I think, to me, it makes complete sense, barring any further detailed discussion when you bring it back on what the fees should actually be. The presentation makes the options pretty clear, that we would want to go with, that I would suggest we go with UECs. One question I have is, are we talking about impact fees for other things besides fire, which we already know about?
Well, Madam Chair, I think that's what Paul has some information relative to that. But yes, I think that's something that we have been directed to look at based upon the growth management plan.
Okay. So are there other commissioners? Commissioner Hanson?
I'm interested in having some impact, looking at impact fees. And
for water and wastewater?
Yes, and for overall, you said a bigger umbrella, right? And I mean, isn't that what you said?
So
first, I guess, let's kind of circle back on impact fees versus UECs. As Madam Chair mentioned here, sorry about that.
That's quite all right. It's a mystery what to call me.
She indicated if we went through the process, and maybe it was County Manager Miller here also mentioned it, we could very well go through the process of determining what impact fees for water and wastewater are, but they're very likely going to be the same thing that we came up with for UECs. The distinction between impact fees and UECs is the process that you have to go through to get them implemented, and then once they are implemented, what you can do with those fees after they're collected.
Which are much more limited.
Right,
So it's a harder process and a more limited use of the money.
right.
Okay.
And then as far as other fees, I guess Paul can answer.
We'll go to that second, because,
That's good. I stepped out, and I might have missed that, so I appreciate that. But then when I look at the rates for the utility options for water, you're recommending option 2, which puts us in line with, basically with Albuquerque. A little lower, and the city is a little lower, so the city is even lower than we are right at the moment, so I find that a little bit challenging, and I really find it challenging with the sewer options, because all of a sudden we're going to be the highest in the entire area.
Well,
And-
one thing to note, as indicated on slide 10, the notes down below the charts. So the Albuquerque Water Authority fee, they last went through their fee in 2007. So their fee is now 12 years old. So even though you're potentially adopting a fee that's close to theirs, they're likely going to be updating their fees in the near future or at some point, which would likely make theirs higher than yours.
And is this Albuquerque City or Bernalillo County?
The Water Authority serves both city and county.
Okay. So they have one regional water authority?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I'll wait for other
Thank you.
questions.
thank you, Commissioner Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What are the dynamics of the pricing? Is it in the city or the county's interest to get more customers or make them beg for it, for a raunchy term?
I guess I can give my opinion on that, but maybe, is John around? Maybe John can answer that question as well. My 2 cents here, I mean, getting customers, that's the only way you bring money and get money in the door is through customers, through rates. So if you need additional funds, the only way you're raising it is through rates. And so the only way you get more money is more customers paying more rates. Maybe John can add more to what I just said.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Moreno, the only thing I would add to that is a simple principle to follow is you want to recover expenses to the extent possible, but you don't want to chase away development. So if your neighbor is much less, that's problematic. But otherwise, you want to just be competitive. And especially with Commissioner Hansen's concerns, I'm considerate of that. It's one of the things that I've gone to talk to the utility director of the city about. And we happened to increase our rates prior to him doing his. And he thanked me for that because it makes the road a little easier. Because he can then say, look at the county's rates, I'm proposing this increase, and it's just the index over time since the last time that we've increased our rate. So that helps us to stay competitive, in my opinion, and that's the intent that I had in the option that's being proposed.
Go ahead.
One more question. Is it in the county's interest to connect, as the case that you and I worked with on La Pradera, where they had a mixture of wells and tanks and God knows what everything. And is there a point where it all has to come together as a unified system?
By come together, do you mean connect or?
Connecting, yeah. Enticing them to connect. They
You mean physically or philosophically?
Physically, yes.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Moreno, thank you for clarifying, Madam Chair, on physically versus philosophically. Physically, they are legally allowed to maintain their system and stay in operation as a self-sufficient system. What we've noticed is that given the 3 communities that have come and asked us to support themselves, or for us to support them, there is a trend, and it has been the trend that I've noticed in other communities as well, where over some extended period of time, homeowners do not like to operate utilities. And they become in a state of disrepair, and it's often too late whenever they come to ask us for help, such that they can maintain, with some minimal assistance, their own infrastructure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's.
I just want to also clarify for everybody that you're looking for direction on moving forward on these, but it's really to move forward on getting more information and proceeding, and then things will be brought back. So we're not actually approving any particular rates today. We're asking questions and getting information and asking to move forward, giving some direction on moving forward.
Madam Chair, that's correct. So if if the board would support us increasing the UECs and staying with the UEC, we would need to come back with an ordinance change. We'd have public meetings and all that. What we were looking for today is direction as to whether that is something that the board would like us to do, whether the direction we're going as far as what we're proposing is a palatable rate, or if you guys are like, no, make it higher, make it lower, because once we publish title and general summary, we'd be putting these out as something proposing to you that we'd like to adopt, and having the public hearings for that. And so we're trying to get some feedback from you today as to whether you'd like us to bring these back in the form of an ordinance, or whether you want to just hold off on that.
Commissioner Hanson?
So I think with the UECs, I see with the water utility expansion charge summary seems to be a reasonable rate hike. I mean, it's not exorbitant. But with the sewer utility expansion, I, as somebody who want to see people hook up to the sewer, I know, like Oshara Village is exactly right. They're struggling to run their own utility plant, and I'm sure they would much prefer not to be doing that, but our fee is way too low. That is clear at $180 for everybody across the board. But then it's $2,000 too high, because the city is at $854, going up to $960. Espanola is $766. Albuquerque is $1860. And I know that none of these people have raised their rates recently. That's all been, everybody is hesitant and, waiting for somebody to take the first leap. And so I'm just wondering if, I would like some justification for 2,000.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Garcia?
maybe can we just, if we have some detailed questions, we can, first of all, so is this going to take 2 public hearings? Madam Chair, Madam Manager?
Madam Chair,
Madam?
at a minimum, we first have published title, request to publish title and general summary, and then we have to have at least 1 hearing. I personally like to have 2 hearings on ordinances for purposes of getting as much public input as possible. So if we did, we could potentially bring it back for request to publish title and general summary in July, and then have a hearing end of July and another hearing in August.
Manager Murillo, thank you. So if the commission up here decides to move this forward, then we can ask all those detailed questions within those next 2 hearings. The only concerns that I have is I would like to see what the county's next steps are for all the impact fees, whether it's for a building permit, fire protection, sewer, water hookup. If somebody has this blank piece of property, what are all overall impact fees in the next 2 years that we're going to come forward and ask for? And how we can do that, I don't know. So some of the other concerns I just have is there's a couple of districts that have a lot of where the growth is going. My district has a lot of, one of our 5 districts has a lot of growth in our area, so it really affects these rates. Well, as the commissioner at the end there stated, people, where they want to not connect. So this is the concerns I would have is, first of all the overall fees we're going to ask for in the future to come, as well as some of our districts are really, it affects our districts more than other districts with all these impact fees, because that's where a lot of the growth is going to the south side, to the community college area. So those are just some of the concerns I have. But if somebody wants to make a motion to move this forward, we still have 2 or 3 more meetings to go on this, and then we can talk about the details.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Roybal, do you have any questions? Are you still with us or on mute?
Not at this point, but I do want to say that, I think that I do have a lot of questions, but I think I'd want to wait for our next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. One thing I wanted to add was, frankly, a $2,000, there are a lot of mutual domestics that have new hookup fees in the $1,500 range, and that's because it's real cost of the meters and the new hookup lines and whatnot, and they're covering their costs. And I know, there's a legacy of some communities not actually charging what it costs to do hookups, and that leads to problems, as you mentioned, with respect to not being able to run systems and it puts the county in the same position. So we're not talking about covering all costs, we're talking about covering some reasonable extension costs. So I don't, just in a ballpark, I don't think that's out of line. But I would be, did you have something to add? Yes.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, I would like to answer your question. Come back to that if you like.
Yes, I would like that.
A question about?
Yes, I would
So
like
she asked specifically if I could, maybe you could restate it for me, please.
I'm interested what your reasoning are for the 2,000 fee from going from 180 to 2,000, and because I feel very strongly that I want people to hook up to sewers more than a lot of things. I can name the other item I want more than sewers, but I think you've already heard that from me. So it concerns me. If we're raising this rate, and yes, we can put out title and general summary, but I would rather put out something that I can support and grab onto and hold and support than something that I'm not sure about. So without that justification of up to 2,000, we're going from 180 to 2,000. That's a big leap.
Madam Chair, John, I would suggest, I think we're going to run out of time, and I think that that's a question that we need to definitely address for the commissioner, and I think probably even to have some individual meetings before we would request to publish title and general summary to explain some of this further and find out what kind of concerns they have, because maybe we need to adjust our proposal.
I would accept that, but I'm not ready to publish general title and summary at this point without having those meetings. And this is certainly something that can come back, and that allows Commissioner Roybal to ask some of his questions also. And we could have this at another meeting is what I would prefer.
Madam Chair, I'm okay with that as well, so we can move on. We have a lot more stuff.
Okay, yes, absolutely. But there was a study, I mean, is there an HDR report on this?
Madam Chair, yes, there is.
So really, the part of the point is, these are not arbitrary figures. These are figures that represent justifiable, realistic fees. So part of the issue here is getting that information imparted to everybody on the board in a reasonable time, and that's what we should be looking forward to. Okay, thank you. So there's no further action. You've gotten feedback, right?
Correct. Madam Chair, got what we needed on UECs. I think that's the preferred method, but you
Yes.
want more information about how we came up with these
Specific,
rates.
yeah.
And then I think our only other question, so that would leave them out of any impact fee study. And so I think all Paul needs to know is, and this will go to what I think Commissioner Garcia was saying, what is it you would do, you want direction on doing the impact fee or development fee study on for what items?
So, Madam Chair, Commissioners, so what we would look at if we take water and sewer out because of the direction or the concept that UECs are a more functional tool for us. Oh, I'm sorry. So if we take the concept that UECs are a more functional tool for the county for water and wastewater, we could still study roads, parks, police, and fire under an impact fee or a development fee study. So that would still be included in that, to Commissioner Garcia's point, what else is on the table?
So we had in earlier meetings, we had some preliminary presentations on impact fees. But can you clarify, are we talking about having further study? Like there's a contract and we're talking about doing further study on this so that at some time in the near future we would get information on some similar recommendations, what the possible charges would be, what they would be based on, and all that sort of thing?
Yes, Madam Chair, that was one of the bullets in the last presentation.
Yes.
Was next steps. And in order to implement this, to even have impact fees under the SLDC and the state statutes, we have to have the 20-year CIP. And to build that out, that's what we're proposing to bring forward to you soon, and then do a development fee study that would say, if we wanted to do impact fees, here's the range of options, just similar to what was presented today on UECs, but with real facts and real numbers and a discussion, and that would take some more months to get to you.
Right. So it seems to me what you're saying is that we've heard about UECs and we've given direction. We're going to get more detailed information on impact fees for the other areas outside of water and wastewater. But in fact, we're going to be able to proceed with talking about capital planning policy development and procedure development before we get that impact fee assessment, because that's going to take several months.
Madam Chair, correct.
Is it likely relevant to Commissioner Garcia's question that we'll have some impact fee specific information about the time that we'll be considering water and wastewater UECs? Because it seems like one of our questions is which ones to implement. We don't have to implement any if we didn't want to. So part of the decisions about implementation will be what each of the fees are, what they would help us with, and how they compound with each other in terms of impacting constituents. Did I get that? Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, you're right. And the development fee study could consider water and wastewater as an option or not, and it will take some time, and we're talking several months. It's not going to be in a short order to.
So, Manager Miller, it sounds like we won't actually be able to look at them all at the same time.
Madam Chair, you could if you want to just wait on the UECs. Until
Okay,
the
so we'll
impact
make that
fees-
decision when the UECs come back again.
Yeah, if you want to wait on those until the impact fee study or development fee study is done, that was part of the reason I want to bring that up, is we're ready to do UECs.
Right.
But you may want to wait until we do the rest of the study.
We may or may, so we'll get this back, and that'll be another component of the decision. Thank you. So does that mean we're ready to go to number 4?
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming and doing the presentation. So we have, the next topic is outside organizations' process for submitting capital outlay project requests. This should be an interesting one.
It's been a good day so far. So this item is informational discussion item. And we talked about this, I believe, at the last BCC and in previous BCCs about there are times where nonprofits or other non-county entities may request the county to serve as a fiscal sponsor or basically a pass-through for money to do different capital projects that could be funded through the state. And in the past, we had adopted a resolution in 2009 that kind of outlined potential procedures for having non-county entities request capital support through the state that would pass through the county. And of course, when that happens, there's impacts to the county. The county most typically has to do all of the procurement, all of the construction, and oftentimes be participating in the maintenance or management. And that takes people, that takes time. That kind of goes back to our previous discussion about bandwidth and priorities and prioritization. So we had talked about, or the board had talked about in previous meetings, re-looking at this resolution, and if possibly we could look at tweaking it. So I went back and looked at the previous resolution and looked at some of the policies and procedures that we have in place now, or we could have in place, and drafted both the paper that's in your packet that kind of outlines the procedures for collaboration, and then also I put together a potential checklist or application questionnaire that we would ask a non-county entity to fill out and complete, and we could obviously work with them to help them on it if needed. But it's to really clarify what a project would be. And in that, you know, we'd ask for basic naming and et cetera. We could ask for purpose of the project, the total funds, all phases, previous funds received from other sources or projects funded through other sources, how the project would benefit residents of Santa Fe County, the number of county residents that would be benefited, names of anticipated sponsors at the legislature, understanding of the New Mexico Anti-Donation Act and what is allowable and not allowable under the anti-donation clause, anticipated role of the county in not only administering the funds, but the long-term collaboration on the project that could reflect on management or maintenance and operations, the role of all parties, again, for maintenance and potential future improvements, and also a statement of understanding that the county would require payment of some sort of lease or some kind of operational
Chair,
charge.
do we have what you're reading off of, or is this part of the draft?
This
I
is
have
on the draft. Yes, this is the
But I only have
draft.
one page of the draft.
Well, we have the draft, but not the attached application. It's not in the packet.
Okay.
Okay.
So, well, tentatively, those are some of the items we would look at. And we will bring this back to you at a future date with a more developed draft and a resolution. And so that's what I'm trying to present today, is this concept of asking these types of questions, and asking then also the process would require that these entities come to us prior to the legislative session in order to be included on that year's list. And back to my previous presentation on the timeline, we would ask them to come in early before we submit the ICIP, but sometimes that doesn't happen, and this process would require, in order for them to be on next year's legislative table, they would have had to come to us by early November. That way we have ability to scope a project, vet it, bring it back to you all for consideration, and then work with DFA to insert it into the ICIP if that was the direction from the board. Right. So it's kind of a two-pronged process here. And we're not trying to, the concept here is not to eliminate participation and collaboration with outside entities, because that's often a very beneficial thing for us. But it's also, I think you've had the discussion in previous meetings, that places challenges on the board when you're being asked to support ideas and concepts that aren't clearly defined or scoped, and there's not a clear understanding of what that potential impact might be on the county.
Madam Chair,
So-
I think this is fine. You can bring it back, right? So we can talk a little bit more about it? This is just your concept as to what's happening. Do you want action on it?
No, I just want to make, again, the heartburn check. If we're on the right path, let's keep going.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Hanson,
I'll-
We all make this.
everybody does it. It just wears off on me.
I'll be
So
hammering next time.
I'm good with this, but I have a few questions, like, if it is an organization that, like, it's no impact to us, we just become the fiscal agent, but then there's the impact of us managing the money, or dispersing the money,
And staff time.
then we would still need the timeline and what to move that forward. And as Commissioner Moreno said, this is part of his dream, that we have a little more oversight over the legislative process. And this looks to me like it might help with guiding that in that direction. So I'm good with moving this forward. I mean, and maybe a little more detail, or maybe some exceptions, or some ideas like that.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, we can develop further and have a dialogue as this moves forward.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Commissioner Roybal, do you have any questions or comments on this piece?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. One thing that occurs to me, I mean, I think this is great for, especially in terms of having, when you showed it inserted in the timeline, justifies why you want the earlier notification and all that stuff. It working well is sort of contingent on us having the other pieces set up better as well, which clearly we're planning to do, but we have to have, but that also includes strategic planning for any number of reasons, right? The strategic planning is it's integral to having a medium and a long-term capital plan. So those things have to be integrated as well. And I guess the one thing that seems like, you've shown how the ICIP should be linked to the short-term, the 5-year capital planning. And in the best of all worlds, which clearly has to include Commissioner Moreno's dream universe, we would, all those things will fall into place. But right now, we also have an ICIP that has hundreds of projects, none of which were ever vetted. And so what is like the little baby gorilla in the room is like, what do we do with all those? And as a matter of fact, Commissioner Hanson alluded to that earlier when she talked about, moving forward, but then all these projects that are already on the plan, and none of them, have been, dealt with retroactively. So I think we just sort of, we need to do something to consider reviewing those as well.
Madam Chair, correct, and that's the two things fit together. And providing the structure and the transparency also allows the ability to say yay or nay more clearly when things come up. And we, again, we're starting this off. It's not going to be perfect, and we'll do it. It's an iterative process to refine it. But hopefully, the conceptual structure is correct, and as we move forward and continue these steps, it'll start to fit a little better.
That's fabulous. So I just want to add, restate my support for this, and also that this is a process that would allow us to justify in our bid to the legislature for capital funding. It'll show that we know what we're talking about in terms of when we can do things, how much we can do. If we're asking for funding now, we can show we can actually use it. Otherwise, we can ask for it next year or 3 years from now. And it also means that it gives us a basis for reviewing a lot of these asks. I mean, in different categories, from short-term needs and specific community needs to strategic needs, which include things like long-term planning and sustainability and things beyond the immediate basic functions of road maintenance and whatnot. And so it's a way of integrating that and making sure the things that are asked of us fit into those or not. So,
Absolutely.
any other questions? Well, thank you. You have what you need on this piece?
Yes.
Excellent. So, number 5, community process for submitting capital outlay projects. I assume that's pretty closely related.
Yes, so the next item is we just want to outline what we're doing, starting our community outreach for capital planning, and it's timed similar to previous years for the ICIP, but with the discussions we're having today, we're trying to turn that into more of a more productive discussion with our communities and show them where we're going with capital planning, how to get engaged, when to get engaged, and what are the potential results for it. And we're also going to be talking about other planning elements that we're working with different communities on and that are available: transportation, open space, agriculture, etc. So we'll be having these meetings, and they're scheduled right now for starting June 10th at the Nancy Rodriguez Community Center, June 18th at Nambe Community Center, June 20th at the Max Cole Community Center in El Dorado, June 24th at La Cienega Community Center, and July 8th at the Edgewood Fire Station. And this is our annual public outreach that has in the past been targeted at ICIP. This year we're trying to change that discussion a little bit and make it a little more part of this whole planning paradigm shift that we've been talking about all afternoon.
Well, that's good to hear. I'll ask a preemptive question. How are you achieving that? By presenting the communities with the structure? I know you said a little bit about it, but with what the strategic planning has suggested so far and where we stand with other projects?
And how we want to get it, but then also taking community input and saying, do you want this road or that center, et cetera, as we have in the past, but also saying, here's the new process that we're working to develop and create and how we're going to vet these projects a little differently so that we are not we maybe have a better ability to bring to you all to look at, do you want a zoo or a botanical park in your...
Part of what I was wondering is, like, I think the last couple of meetings was kind of like everybody get into a room and what kind of, write down your project suggestions, and we got all of that. And so you get all kinds of... I wonder, is the process could potentially include discussion with the community? Where do you see your community going? What needs do you see? Why do you see them? So that there's some discussion. I mean... Yeah,
and that's the whole community planning kind of envelope that we try to address. And we don't do that in every single community, in every meeting, but that's how we try to outline the process and what is the basis of it and what is the expectation of the constituents as to what this does, how do you get involved, and what are the limitations as well as the opportunities.
Other commissioners? Manager Miller?
And I think one of the things we want to really steer away from in these meetings is just because you raised your hand and said, I want this, it's not going to go on our ICIP, because it doesn't mean it's a defined project. And that's one of the things that's happened, and somewhat at the direction of the board. The board said, hey, if somebody brought it up, then make sure it gets on our ICIP, but it wasn't a defined project. It was like, run the water line to Amy. Well, $10 million. And it was like, that's not a realistic project, yet we just threw it on the ICIP, and then you get like you get $50,000. What do you do with that? So I think one of the things in these meetings is we want to educate the communities that are bringing up ideas. Like, this is great, we're hearing your ideas, but we also need to make them into a real project. That is what would eventually make it might get onto the CIP, right, 20-year, but not onto the ICIP at the 5-year ready for funding.
Right. Well, and that was kind of part of what I was driving at, because if you get questions like, a few rural communities pipe up saying we need more public transportation and there's some discussion about what the options might be, it might really be back to the county to be able to say, during capital planning, is this something we can consider? Not, it's a project on the ICIP, but it's getting community input on what some real needs are, which, you know, that's one of the things we really want to do. Commissioner Roybal, do you have anything, any questions? Not to put you on the spot, but it's hard to hear if you're trying to break in.
Yeah, no, I'm listening.
Okay, great, thanks. I just did.
I will. I'll get your attention.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions on this section?
So this was just informational, just to let you know we're going out, and this is where the dates and times that we're going.
Actually, that's appreciated. This is very timely because it's happening now, and I'm, for one, happy to see that it's actually being integrated. I mean, you know, we're trying to modify it to fit in with what we're trying to achieve in terms of a better process. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So that moves us on to 6, reallocation of funding for capital projects. Mr. Kelly.
Yes, Madam Chair, good afternoon. Commissioners, good afternoon. Mike Kelly, the Public Works Department. The item before you this afternoon is staff's recommendation for reallocation of funding for capital improvement projects. On March 27th, a special BCC meeting was held and an update on capital projects was presented at that time. During that meeting, some suggestions were discussed for potential repurposing of project funding. During the month of May, Finance Department and Public Works Department have met 3 times to reconcile all of the capital project improvement budgets. The item before you represents staff's recommendation for the reallocation of funds for several road, fire, and open space and trails projects. I'll address the road projects first. In 2016 and 2012, the voters approved a total of $32.6 million in general obligation bond funding for road projects. Between those 2 bond cycles, 45 projects were approved. 28 of those projects have been completed. 8 projects are in design or in construction. 3 projects were deleted from the list or are being proposed to be repurposed, and 6 are in need of additional funding. In total, there is approximately $1,605,863 available for reallocation and GOB funding for road projects. Staff's approach to reallocating funds for the road projects was to reallocate the available funding such that the projects that were part of the 2012 and 2016 GOB bond questions can be completed. No new projects are being created as part of this recommendation. Staff recommends the following amounts be reallocated to the following road projects: $380,000 to CR 89, $20,000 to CR 88B, $412,879 to Camino Pacifico, $500,000 to CR 55A, $172,532 to Toltec, and $120,452 to CR 50A. That addresses the proposed suggestion for reallocation for road projects. Reallocation for fire.
Madam Chair, can we get, and sorry, Mike, can we discuss and give up or down on this? And the reason I'm asking is because anything that you give us up or down on, if you say yes, then we're going to include it in the final budget in the at the end of the month.
Right.
And so this one actually,
we need specific.
We do need to be
direction.
specific. So it's probably best if we take this by area.
Madam Chair, I would actually like to thank Manager Miller and her team, finance team, Public Works Department, that actually looked at all the projects and the funding that we had from the different general obligation bond projects and what the memo actually states. I appreciate staff, thank you. And with that, I'd like to make a motion for approval. That way we can give Manager Miller and her team some direction, or actually make a motion for approval.
Okay, so is that a motion for approval
For these road project.
for all 6 of them, for the full recommendation? Commissioner, was that?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. For all 6.
For staff's recommendation, yes.
Second in question.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second and discussion. Commissioner Hanson, did you have?
Yeah, I seconded. We're in discussion. So I just wanted to know, All these projects are in District 3, and this is money from District 3 that's just staying in District 3?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, the projects, the funding comes from two different sources. Part of it is what the Finance Department determines as investment income, and the other projects are from previously discussed projects like County Road 105A and Camino Sedeste that we had presented at the March 27th meeting, and we'd had follow-up discussions with commissioners on those. So those funding, that funding of the $780,000 that fell to cash, if you will, $656,000 of that funding was from Commission District number 1 and Commission District number 4. So the remainder, the majority of the remaining funding that fell to cash, I believe it was about $124,000. The majority of that was from completed projects in Commission District 3.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Hanson, County Road 89 and 88B are in District 1. Camino Pacifico and Toltec are in Commission District 4, and County Road 55A and 50A are in District 3. And we tried to the best that we could reallocate from projects that were in the district to projects that are in the district. It's not dollar for dollar, it's almost impossible to do that, but it's very close. And with each commissioner in those districts, 1, 4, 3, and 4, we talked to them specifically about the roads that we would be moving it from to the roads we'd be moving it to.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Madam
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Roybal?
I just wanted, that was actually my question as well. Just so I'm glad that Manager Miller did clarify that, because I know that I met with Mr. Kelly, and so I just wanted to make sure that those were the county roads that we discussed. So I appreciate the clarification, and you know, I'm in full support of moving this.
Okay, we'll have a vote soon. Mr. Kelly?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Hanson, our approach absolutely was to try to reallocate the funding that was available to finish the questions, the roads that were on those 2012 and 2016 bond questions. So there are no new roads being proposed here. It's just to finish the projects that were approved.
So if there's no further discussion, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any dissent or objections? Abstentions? Thank you. So I guess, so you have that direction.
Very good. Moving on to reallocation for fire projects. In 2016, $7 million in
Like that side's dragging. To remove it over, we're good.
I don't understand the question.
I think he was talking to somebody else.
I think it's done.
I never mind. I don't. I'll ask the question later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
In 2016, $7 million in GEO bond funding was approved by the voters for public safety facilities.
Do we have this on our board doc?
Yes, it's
6B?
vertical projects. It's in the same memo. It's in the same memo, it's just below the roads thing?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
1.2 million was allocated to the Pewaukee Volunteer Fire Station. Since the property has not been acquired, the fire department is recommending the reallocation of $660,852 of GOB funding from the Pewaukee Fire Station to the following fire projects: $259,160 to the Chimayo Fire Station, $251,173 to the Turquoise Trail Fire Station, and $519 to the Madrid Fire Station.
Commissioner Garcia?
I'd like to move for approval with staff's recommendations.
Well, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, for discussion, this was actually discussed slightly more generally at our previous budget hearing, and if I'm not mistaken, that was,
Madam Chair,
it was partly a timing thing to be able to use the money now and proceed with the other parts of the projects. So is that still the case?
Madam Chair, yes, as far as I know it is. If Chief Sperling is in the audience, he could speak.
And in the meantime, Commissioner Roybal, did you have an additional question?
I did have a question. It's my understanding, and from what I heard, it appears that we're moving funding from the Poake Fire Station to one fire station in District 1, and the other two are not in District 1. And can we have an explanation as to why we're moving that?
Chief Sperling's going to address that.
Madam
Thank you,
Chair, Commissioner Roybal. So you're correct. We had set aside or requested $1.2 million for a Hakona fire station, but without the acquisition of the property, that project's been placed on hold. And we thought it was most beneficial to the county overall and to the county fire department in particular to request a reallocation of some of those funds to Chimayo Fire Station project, which is an apparatus bay and much needed storage, and that is in District 1. And then to complete the Turquoise Trail Fire Station project, which is a replacement of Fire Station 3 in the village of Cerrillos, and then the Madrid Fire Station, which is a much needed training room. All three of these projects have a significant safety component for the volunteer staff who utilize them, as all of these projects help alleviate staff overcrowding in the apparatus bays in particular, and then in Madrid in particular, also getting the volunteers out of training in the apparatus bay and putting them in a separate space. So I regarded these as kind of a county-wide effort and not specific to districts. And if we could manage this reallocation, it would be much appreciated.
I wonder if
Madam
So
Chair,
anticipating,
I was going to add to that. We didn't allocate when we went out to the, when we went out in the bond questions, and when we look at projects on total, we don't go, okay, we have $25 million, so we do $5 million in District 1, $5 million in District 2, $5 million in District 3. We just can't. It doesn't work that way. What we do try to do, though, is address the needs in each commission district, the highest needs at that time, based on whatever it costs. And so I do want to point out that we also have two other rather large projects in District 1 and fire stations that we're not looking to move any money away from, that we hope to complete. Our biggest barrier here is that we don't own the land, and we're working to get the land, and we want to leave enough money in this project to get the land for both the transfer station and the fire station, and still come back with the request in the next round of funding to get the fire station built. But our goal was to try to get the land acquired and get the groundwork done where we need to move a driveway, and leave for sure enough money on the fire side of that project to do that, as well as enough to get the transfer station done completely. And so that's still staying there. We're kind of faced with letting all four projects sit if we don't find some funding for these three.
And thank you for that, because I was actually going to ask you to speak a little to that, because you're not pulling all of the money out. And I just wanted that to be highlighted, and there's the reason for it. And although we had sort of talked about that earlier too, I just thought that was helpful.
So the money that's left over, what percentage, if we do acquire the property, will we be able to complete with that?
What percentage?
Just the acquisition of the property and the driveway?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Roybal, as you recall, we have 2.3 million, something like that, in GRT for the transfer station. And what we're trying to do is take that along with the 600,000 that would be left in this funding, or 540, and acquire the land, move the driveway as required by DOT, and do all the site prep for the fire station and get the transfer station completed and water to the site.
So as far as the fire station, I'm hearing site prep.
Site
Land
prep and water.
acquisition, site prep, and driveway and water.
Okay, well, I don't agree, but, we'll see how it goes.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Roybal, we don't have enough money to, even if we left the money where it is, we don't have enough money to build the station. So we,
We're further away, so that's fine. Okay.
but it's our anticipation that that would be the very next station that we fund. So that it would be, about the time we would be ready to build it, we would fund it.
Well, I actually just want to express that I appreciate the thought that was given this to be able to complete several projects in face of a time delay that, realistic, which you can predict will take a period of time to do land acquisition and use the money efficiently now and still be able to move forward with this other project. So if there's no further discussion or questions, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any abstentions or opposition?
Aye,
Okay, so you're opposed?
that's correct.
Thank you. Okay. So carries 4-1. Thank you very much, Chief Sperling. So, Mike, I assume we have more on this.
Yes, Madam Chair. The last reallocation suggestion that we're bringing forward today is regarding the South Meadows Open Space Project. While for $337,008 during the reconciliation, it was identified that amount, $337,008, is available in gross receipts tax in the South Meadows Open Space Project. And while discussions are that a minimal improvement could be made to that facility at that location, there's no guarantee that if we do any improvements on that facility that the city is going to be willing to take it over and maintain it. So at this time, given that uncertainty, staff is recommending that is proposing that the $337,000 be reallocated to the Santa Fe River Greenway Trail project for use on the next phase of that project.
Madam
Okay,
Chair,
so-
I move to approve.
Second for discussion. A couple of questions, Mr. Kelly. What district is this in?
This is in District 2.
And Madam Chair, what will $337,000 get us?
I will defer to Colleen, or I'll let Colleen Baker speak to that.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Colleen Baker with the Santa Fe County Projects Division. So the South Meadows open space was purchased in 2001 by the county under the original bond sale that created the Open Space and Trails program. At the time, it was recognized that that area of the city, or actually it was county at that time, was rapidly developing, and there really weren't very many parks in that kind of underserved part of the county. So the original advisory committee recommended acquisition of that property, and we did acquire it. We have completed a master plan and a management plan for that property, and it's envisioned as an urban open space, an urban natural area, not a full-blown park, and an outdoor classroom there's approximately 6 public schools that are within walking distance of the site. So for the funding that was allocated in approximately 2010, there's about, as Mr. Kelly said, there's about $337,000 left. We could develop a very simple trailhead. It's actually also on the future alignment of the Acequia Trail that the city is going to develop. We could develop a simple trailhead and outdoor classroom with some nodes where the classes can come and kind of just observe the natural landscape. It is a remnant of one of the long lots of the historic agricultural areas. It was served by the Acequia Madre generations ago.
Madam Chair, so Ms. Baker, if we're going to take this money from this allocated project and we're going to move it down the river. So what are we going to build with $337,000 down the river? Because that's the request here, is to take money from the South Meadows Park and put it over here. So what are we going to build over here with that $337,000?
So my understanding is right now we have design and acquisition funded for the next segment of the Santa Fe River Trail, which would be from Siler Road to San Ysidro Crossing. And so that 337 would go into the pot of money for, and I believe the cost estimate, I'm not up on that, but it's in the neighborhood of $4 million. So that 337,000 would just go towards the funding for construction at the next time that funding is allocated for that project.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, when we bought South Meadows, it was out in the county. Now it's in the city limits. When the city did the annexation, we offered the land to the city along with this funding. They said, and so that they could have a city park. Having a park inside, a county park inside city limits actually requires permission from the city for us to have a park inside the city limits. We actually went out to bid at some point before this was even annexed to try to do the first phase of development of this park, and this funding fell short of it. So we said to the city, we'll give you the land, we'll give you the money. They said they don't want it. They don't want the park, they don't want the land because they don't want another park, and they didn't want the money. So we could either do what Colleen said, which was minimal development, much smaller, just a small parking area and trailhead, or we could take the money and allocate it to the River Trail, which is an ongoing project for us.
Madam Chair, Manager Miller, thank you. So you have a motion?
Yes.
You have a second?
Yes. But under further discussion, would this then be put on hold until some indefinite future time? Or, I mean, I don't think this is an issue but it is a question. We just wouldn't act now on South Meadows.
Madam Chair, yeah, I would think this is something for discussion between the City Council and the County Commission, whether that's something they want us to develop into a larger park and it's ours, even though it's in the city limits, or whether they want to purchase the land from us. They could purchase it for some other use. We would have, if we sell the land, we have to sell it for at least what we paid for it and refund the bond funds, because we spent about $1,050,000, $1,075,000 for it or something like that. But we used general obligation bonds for open space. So we would either need to, if it gets used for anything other than open space or trails or something, we have to pay the bond fund back. And so I think it's really a matter of whether the County Commission and the City Council want to do something, but we've been sitting on it now for 5 years.
Probably a little longer.
Yeah, since on those funds allocated to that with an offer to the city in our annexation agreement if they wanted it. And Commissioner Hanson and I met with them, and they indicated they were not interested in having us turn it over to them.
So we have a motion and a second. If there isn't any further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Madam Chair, just really quick, I just have this question for Mr. Kelly, because I've seen these projects here for a few years, a couple of years. So the $1,605,863 will actually cover those 6 projects?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, correct.
And the same question is in regards to the $660,852 will cover those 3 projects?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, correct.
All right, and then Madam Chair, I understand where we are with the 33708. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. So that moves us on to the ADA transition plan.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Paul Olofsson, Planning Division. So this item before you is in your packet. You'll find a large spreadsheet that itemizes or lists out potential projects that can be funded for ADA improvements within county facilities. As you'll recall, the county did approve a bond question with $2 million for, or the voters did, for ADA improvements at county facilities. We also completed this ADA transition plan, and the board has adopted it. We used the data and the information from the transition plan to create this list, and it's based on priorities as well as short-term priorities. This plan was developed to have short-term, mid-term, and long-term priorities. Short-term is 1 to 5 years, and those are more important ADA improvements that were important for facilities to be conducted prior to others. So using that list and looking at the prioritization as well as grouping projects within facilities. So if we're going to go out to, if for example, the first one, Benny J. Community Center Park, if we're going to go there, let's do all the improvements at once. It makes more efficient and more functional sense to do this. So we've developed this list. It totals up to, I want to say, $1,994,139.16. Also, these estimates that were used to put this together were based on national standards. We may have some savings either doing some of the work in-house or through local contractors who may be efficiencies and et cetera. So this is a preliminary list. We're asking for direction from the board to move forward. Also, just on the methodology of creating the list, I said we grouped them by facility. We used the ranking of importance for whichever action was needed to get it done. We also tried to focus on high use or high use facilities where a lot of the public goes. And lastly, some of these are gap funding for existing planned projects where we can insert a little bit of money to cover some of the ADA improvements and help that project get fully funded and moving forward.
So it's not clear just from the list itself. Are they listed in priority order?
Madam Chair, no. I think it's alphabetical.
I'm sorry?
Oh, no, I guess it is priority, yes.
In our
But-
packet?
Yes, so this spreadsheet.
No, Paul, in our packet, it starts with Benny J, Chimayo, El Rancho. It doesn't have no ranking.
So let's not have a free-for-all.
So Madam Chair, they're listed in priority rankings and consolidating multiple priorities within a facility. So this is listed alphabetically with the highest utilized facilities, and we combined multiple projects. So Benny J had 3 different types of projects or 6 different types of projects that had priorities 1, 2, and 3. So Benny J being one of the highest ranked priorities, we combined then the priorities 2 and 3 into make one larger project so that we weren't touching Benny J twice. So the projects are in alphabetical order based upon the highest use and the highest priority in this document. This is all the projects. We're giving you a list that totaled $2 million that took all these projects that were priority 1s, 2s, and 3s, and we combined them for a facility to gain some efficiencies.
But the facilities themselves are listed in alphabetical order.
Correct.
So how much money are we talking about? What kind of direction are you looking for right now? Because this is a great summary, but I don't know how much.
We're asking for direction to proceed with $1.994 million in projects.
All of them?
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. So further discussion, Commissioner Hanson?
So I don't see on this list, this building. Is this building not included in this list?
Madam Chair, because this is already planned and programmed through the administrative complex project, we took it out because it will get touched when we do the renovations here. So we don't need to allocate funding from the $2 million bond project to this because the ADA improvements here are already funded in the renovation project.
But wouldn't it be helpful if we use some of this funding
No,
to?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, no, this is the same issue with PV that we talked about last week. We have an existing project that has an existing scope. Within that existing scope, this was a requirement of that contract. To come back now and add in money complicates matters with the construction design build contract we have in place. So I appreciate the idea, but to add more money in now after we have a contract underway, and that's actually me making noise below, it doesn't make sense from a construction standpoint. So those were eliminated from this list, and we're taking care of it within the existing bond funding.
And in fact, the ADA components are already in the project.
Yes, and then
Yeah.
we used that money that was identified in the plan, and we're being able to spread it out with other projects that are listed in here.
Great. Other questions?
Madam Chair, move for approval for discussion.
Second.
Well,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, Paul or Mr. Flores, regarding let's just use an example, the First Judicial DA's office. I believe the County Commission, at the end of 2017, voted on this list. And so the question I have is, the DA's building has some money that's set aside for construction remodel. None of that money's being touched, based from this.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, that's correct. This money in the ADA transition plan, because ADA was a requirement of those renovations, we're able, since that building hasn't been let under a construction contract, is utilize the funding that we've allocated here, leverage it with the existing funding that's in place to make a project.
Madam Chair, Mr. Flores, in regards to the La Cienega ADA, which I understand is down there on the list, the La Cienega ADA, this money does not conflict with the money that we have sitting there to redo the parking lot area and drainage, correct?
What?
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, again, that it won't conflict with the existing funding. What it does, it allows us to combine existing funding, leverage it with this money that we're proposing for the ADA improvements, and make one project, hopefully gaining efficiencies with construction. So combining pots of money in to make a project.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Roybal, do you have any questions on the ADA projects? Okay. So I do have a motion and a second, do I not?
Yes.
So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify that not every single project that's listed in here is funded through this $2 million. These are the ones that we have ranked the best to get efficiencies and get them moving. So thank you for your time and for the.
And Madam Chair,
Thank you very
Madam
much.
Chair, Paul, these projects will be completed by the end of the year?
No, this is just this month.
We're working on it, and we're moving forward. I can't promise you a timeline.
So before we adjourn, I want to thank all the department heads and senior staff for spending all this time and doing all the work for these summaries and the good presentations, and to augment this process. I really think it's valuable for the county, and really appreciate you, all the time you spent. Manager Miller, are there any, is there any concluding business or announcements or anything?
Madam Chair, I just want to thank you and the board for your time for this. This is always difficult. Capital planning is probably some of the hardest planning that we do, and we really appreciate your thoughtful consideration of our recommendations and your support on moving forward on these items.
Thank you. I really commend the county for trying to do an improved process, and the suggestions that were made were really well thought out, so it made our job a lot easier. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.